Moonlight glistens off stolen Border Patrol insignia, a perfect heist, until engines suddenly fail. The Cartel Hijackers curse as their prize vessel drifts helplessly in the current. They never noticed the solitary fishing boat approaching, nor questioned why an old man would fish these waters at midnight. They certainly didn't recognize Commander Michael Reeves, whose 27 years commanding Coast Guard interdiction operations made him Alajan cartels once feared. As their weapons swing toward the lone fisherman, they miss the military precision in his movements, the hidden modifications to his civilian vessel, and the gleam of recognition in his eyes. For while the cartel stole a boat, Reeves built the damn thing, including its remote kill switch. Tonight, the Rio Grande becomes his final battleground. The first bullet whizzes past his ear. Too close. Reeves doesn't flinch. His weathered hands remain steady on the throttle as he cuts through the murky waters. 4 cartel gunmen, armed to the teeth, versus one 63-year-old man should be no contest. But they don't know what he knows. The boat they've stolen isn't just any patrol vessel. It's experimental, nicknamed La Fantasma by its engineers. Behind the cartel men, the vessel's navigation lights flicker eerily, then die completely. In the sudden darkness, one of them nervously trains his night vision scope on the approaching. "Fisherman, Jefe," he whispers urgently. "That man, I think I know his face." The cartel leader squints into the darkness. From where? The wall. His picture is on the wall of every captain we've lost at sea. A chill runs through the warm Texas night. Because legends aren't supposed to come back from retirement. And ghosts aren't supposed to hunt the living. Commander Michael Reeves had promised his wife Clara that retirement would stick this time. 3 years ago, he'd turned in his badge, hung up his uniform with its impressive row of medals, and walked away from the service that had defined his life for nearly 3 decades. The Coast Guard had been more than a career. It had been his purpose, his identity, his family, when his own flesh and blood barely recognized him between deployments. Their modest ranch-style home in Port Isabel, Texas, sat less than a mile from the coast, close enough to smell the salt air, but far enough to pretend he'd moved on. Most mornings now followed the same quiet routine. Coffee on the porch as the sun rose, tending to his small garden of peppers and tomatoes that Clara insisted would be therapeutic, and occasionally fixing whatever needed fixing around the house. Clara watched him with careful eyes. After 42 years of marriage, she knew the signs. The way he still woke before dawn, rigid as a board, how he'd stare out at the water for hours, listening to the Coast Guard channel on an old radio he thought she didn't know about. The nightmares that came more frequently now, not less. "You miss it," she said one morning. Not a question, but a statement of fact. Michael's calloused hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Miss what? Don't play dumb with me, Michael Reeves. I've been watching you fade away for 3 years now." He shook his head. "I'm right here, aren't I? Growing tomatoes like a regular civilian. Your body's here. The rest of you is still out there." She gestured toward the horizon. On the water, before he could respond, his phone rang. The special tone, the one he'd assigned to only one contact. Captain Elena Vasquez, his former second-in-command, and protégé, now heading the Rio Grande Special Operations Unit. His pulse quickened despite himself. "Don't answer it," Clara said. But they both knew he would. 15 minutes later, Michael was in his truck, heading toward the border. A file folder on the passenger seat containing surveillance photos that shouldn't have been in civilian hands. The cartel activity had spiked in the past month. Bolder incursions into U.S. waters, new smuggling routes, and most troubling targeted attacks on Border Patrol vessels. At 63, his body reminded him daily that he wasn't a young man anymore. The old back injury from a boarding operation gone wrong in 2009. The knee that predicted rain better than any meteorologist. But his mind was sharp as ever, and something about these patterns felt personal, like someone was sending a message specifically to him. The truck's radio crackled with the police scanner he kept mounted under the dash. "All units respond. Suspected cartel activity at Marker 23, Rio Grande. Border Patrol requesting immediate assistance." Reports of shots fired. Michael's grip tightened on the wheel. Marker 23, right where the prototype vessel, La Fantasma, was scheduled for water testing today. The experimental patrol boat he'd helped design before retirement, equipped with advanced surveillance systems and a remote engine kill switch that only 3 people knew existed. He pulled over, unfolded the small laptop Elena had given him, and entered a 16-digit code from memory. The tracking software loaded, showing a blinking dot moving upriver at high speed. La Fantasma was on the move, but the test wasn't scheduled for another 4 hours. Damn it! He slammed the laptop shut. Someone had taken the bait. Michael reached into the glove compartment and removed his personal sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226 that had been with him for 20 years. Next to it was a small metal device no bigger than a key fob, the remote kill switch. He'd insisted on this failsafe over the objections of the defense contractor. There's always a back door, he'd argued. Better we control it than someone else. At the next turnoff, he pulled down a dirt road that led to a small private dock where his fishing boat, the Clara's Mercy, was moored. To most it looked like a simple skiff, the kind retirees used for leisurely afternoons catching bass. Few would notice the reinforced hull, the military-grade navigation system disguised as outdated equipment, or the hidden compartments containing gear no recreational fisherman would need. As he prepared to cast off, his phone rang again. "Clara, where are you?" she asked, though she already knew. "They've taken La Fantasma," he answered simply. A long pause. Then, "Is this the last time, Michael? Really the last?" He looked out across the water, where the sun was beginning to set. In a few hours, darkness would provide the cover they all needed, cartel and commander alike. "Yes," he promised. "One last mission, then I'm done for good." But as he started the engine, memories flooded back, not of peaceful patrols or routine interdictions, but of the operation 8 years ago that had nearly cost him everything. The night he'd faced Alejandro Vargas, the rising star of the Nuevo Laredo cartel, and left him for dead in the Gulf. The night that had haunted his dreams ever since. Michael didn't believe in coincidences. If someone had stolen La Fantasma, if someone was creating a pattern only he would recognize, there was only one explanation. Alejandro Vargas was alive, and he was coming for revenge. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the Border Patrol Command Center, watching chaos unfold on 6 different screens. 3 hours ago, the prototype vessel La Fantasma had vanished during what should have been a routine maintenance check. The 2 technicians assigned to the pre-test inspection were found unconscious, zip-tied in a maintenance shed. By the time they'd regained consciousness, the boat was gone. "Play it again," she ordered, staring at the security footage. The camera showed 4 men in Border Patrol uniforms approaching the dock. Nothing suspicious in their gait, nothing to indicate they didn't belong. Perfect credentials, perfect timing, perfect execution. "We've identified this one," her analyst said, freezing the frame on a face partially visible beneath a cap. "Marco Delgado, mid-level member of the Nuevo Laredo cartel. The others are unknowns." Elena's stomach tightened. "Nuevo Laredo, you're sure? Positive ID? Why?" She didn't answer, instead pulling out her phone and stepping away. Michael needed to know immediately. This wasn't a random hijacking. It was targeted, personal. Across the river in Nuevo Laredo, Mexico, Alejandro Vargas reclined in his leather chair, watching live feed from La Fantasma's cameras as his men familiarized themselves with the controls. 8 years of patience, of rebuilding his empire from nothing, of enduring surgeries to repair what Commander Reeves had destroyed, all leading to this moment. He traced the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw, a permanent reminder of the night he should have died. American intelligence had reported him killed in the operation, a convenient fiction he'd encouraged. It was easier to build when your enemies thought you were a ghost. "Is he coming?" he asked the man beside him. Felix, his head of security, nodded. "Our sources confirm he left his home 40 minutes ago. He's taken his fishing boat." A smile spread across Alejandro's face. "Alone? As you predicted. The old man still thinks he's invincible." Alejandro ran his fingers over a small model of La Fantasma on his desk. For 3 years, he'd planted operatives in the Border Patrol, paid off contractors, patiently gathered intelligence on the prototype vessel and its capabilities. Not for the boat itself, though its technology would benefit his operation. No, the vessel was merely bait. "Everything is ready at the island?" he confirmed. Felix nodded. "The team is in position. Once we have Reeves, we'll proceed to phase 2. Alejandro's phone chimed with an encrypted message. He read it, and his smile widened. "Right on schedule. Reeves has activated the tracking system." He turned to the boat's live feed. "Cut the engines." On screen, his men looked confused as the command came through. "Now, we're in the middle of the channel." "Now," Alejandro repeated firmly. Let him think his little kill switch worked. Let him approach with confidence. Out on the water, Michael Reeves navigated his fishing boat with practiced precision through the darkness. The tracking system showed La Fantasma drifting near one of the river's widest sections, where the boundary between the United States and Mexico blurred in the water. He'd activated the kill switch 20 minutes ago, and now it was a matter of approach and timing. His mind drifted back to his final conversation with Clara before departure. "If it's him, if it's really Vargas, you should call for backup," she pleaded. You're not with the Coast Guard anymore. You don't have to do this alone. If I involve the department, this becomes an international incident, he'd explained. Too many variables, too many chances for him to slip away again. I need to confirm it's him first. What he hadn't told her was the guilt that had haunted him. For 8 years, the mission had been to capture Vargas, to bring him in to face justice. Instead, in the chaos of a firefight on rough seas, Michael had made a choice that violated everything his service stood for. He'd left a man to die, abandoned, in the water with a gunshot wound. The fact that Thaman was a cartel leader responsible for dozens of deaths didn't change what it had done to Michael's soul. If Vargas was truly alive, perhaps this was a chance for redemption, a chance to do it right this time. As he approached the drifting patrol boat, Michael cut his engines and drifted closer, using the current to maintain stealth. Through his night vision binoculars, he could make out 4 figures on deck, their weapons ready, but their posture uncertain. They hadn't expected the boat to stop, and now they were sitting ducks in US waters, vulnerable Tony passing border patrol craft. But Michael knew these waters intimately. This section of the river rarely saw patrols at midnight. They would have at least 30 minutes before anyone might pass by. More than enough time for whatever was about to happen. He raised the remote kill switch, his thumb hovering over the restart button. With a press, he could reactivate La Fantasma's engines, giving the hijackers their mobility back. It made no tactical sense, but it might draw out whoever was really behind this. His satellite phone vibrated in his pocket. Elena. Tell me you didn't go after them alone, she said without preamble. I need to know if it's him, Michael replied. It's Nuevo Laredo cartel, confirmed. But Michael, listen to me, this isn't random. We've got reports of unusual cartel movements. Multiple boats converging on your location from the Mexican side. They're not just stealing a prototype, they're setting a trap. Michael's blood ran cold as he processed this information. He scanned the shoreline on the Mexican side, noticing, for the first time, the unnatural shadows that could be boats waiting in the inlets. How long until backup arrives? He asked, already calculating his options. 20 minutes, minimum. Get out of there, Michael. This isn't your fight anymore. But as he prepared to retreat, a spotlight from La Fantasma suddenly blazed to life, illuminating his position. The kill switch in his hand emitted a sharp beep, then went dead. Its signal jammed. Through the blinding light, a voice called out across the water, a voice he'd never forgotten. Commander Reeves! After 8 years, I believe we have unfinished business. The spotlight dimmed just enough for Michael to see a figure standing at the helm of La Fantasma. Alejandro Vargas, his face half in shadow, the scar visible even at this distance. I've been waiting for this reunion for a very long time, Vargas continued. Please, join us aboard. I insist. As if on cue, the engine of Michael's boat suddenly sputtered and died. He'd been so focused on disabling their vessel that he never considered they might do the same to his. The current began carrying his powerless boat directly toward La Fantasma. From the Mexican shoreline, multiple boats emerged from the shadows, cutting off any route of escape. The trap was complete. Michael reached for his satellite phone to warn Elena, but a single shot rang out, the bullet precisely destroying the device in his hand without touching him. A demonstration of both skill and intent. No need for outside interference, Vargas called out. This is between us. You and I have personal matters to settle. As the vessels closed in around him, Michael realized that this wasn't just an inciting incident in his story. It was the continuation of a confrontation that had never truly ended 8 years ago. Tonight would bring resolution. One way or another. Elena Vasquez listened to the dead connection on her phone, then immediately initiated emergency protocols. All available units to the Rio Grande. Sector 7. Officer in distress. Potential hostage. Situation. She grabbed her tactical gear and headed for the door. Captain, her analyst called after her. There's something else. We've detected unusual activity on the surveillance network. Someone's been accessing our systems from the inside. Elena paused. A mole? Worse. They've taken control of the entire border sensor grid in Sector 7. Backup won't just be delayed, they'll be blind. The realization hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Michael or even the stolen prototype. This was the beginning of something much larger. Lock down all systems, she ordered, and get me the director on the phone, now. Back on. The water. Michael Reeves watched as his fishing boat drifted inexorably toward La Fantasma, and the man he'd believed dead for 8 years. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for him, but for the entire border region. As the 2 vessels came together with a gentle bump, Vargas extended his hand with a cold smile. Welcome aboard, Commander. Your final mission begins now. The first blow came without warning. A sharp punch to Michael's kidney that sent him to his knees on the deck of La Fantasma. He'd expected this, steeled himself for it. But 63-year-old reflexes couldn't match the speed of Vargas's enforcers. Two men hauled him upright, while a third patted him down, removing his concealed sidearm and the tactical knife strapped to his ankle. "You still carry the SIG," Vargas observed, examining the confiscated weapon. "Sentimental value," Michael said, nothing, using the moment to assess his surroundings. 4 armed men on deck, Vargas, and likely a driver below. La Fantasma's engine had restarted, the boat now moving steadily downriver toward the Gulf, away from where Border Patrol would be. Searching. "You're wondering about your chances," Vargas continued, correctly reading Michael's tactical assessment. "Let me save you the calculation. There are 3 more boats following us, each with 5 of my best men. The border sensor grid is under our control for the next hour, and your protégé Captain Vasquez is currently racing toward a location 15 miles from here, following false transponder signals." He stepped closer, his scarred face inches from Michael's. "You have no backup, Commander. No service behind you. No country watching your back, just like I had none when you left me to die in the Gulf." "You were presumed dead after the firefight," Michael replied, his voice steady, despite the pain radiating from his kidney. "The water was rough, visibility 0. We searched for survivors." Vargas laughed, the sound harsh and humorless. "Is that the story you told yourself these 8 years? That you made a genuine effort to find me? The official report, which I paid good money to obtain, says your exact words were, 'Target neutralized. Continuing with primary objective.' You left me, bleeding in shark-infested waters to secure the drug shipment. The great Commander Reeves, sacrificing a human life for a few kilos of cocaine." The accusation stung because it contained a kernel of truth. The mission parameters had been clear. The shipment was the priority, Vargas secondary. But in that moment of decision, had Michael chosen the easier path? Had he convinced himself Vargas was dead because retrieving him alive would have been more difficult? "If I'd known you were alive, I would have brought you in to face justice," Michael said finally. "Justice?" Vargas spat the word. "Your American justice system that would lock me away while your politicians and bankers profit from my industry. No, Commander, tonight you face my justice system." He nodded to his men, who bound Michael's hands with zip ties and forced him to sit against the gunwale. One of them approached with a syringe. "What is this?" Michael demanded, struggling against his restraints. "Insurance," Vargas replied. "The evening's events require you alert, but compliant." The needle plunged into Michael's neck, and warmth spread through his veins. Not enough to knock him unconscious, he realized as his muscles relaxed involuntarily, but enough to make resistance futile. "Now," Vargas continued, settling into the captain's chair, "let me tell you what happens next. In approximately 40 minutes, we will reach a private island in international waters. There, you will help me access La Fantasma's secure systems. All of them, including the experimental surveillance package that your government hasn't officially acknowledged." Michael forced his drugged mind to focus. "The surveillance system is locked down. Even I can't access it without Border Patrol authorization." Vargas smiled. That might have been true 8 years ago. But technology evolves, and so do I. He held up a small device. "This contains everything I need to bypass conventional security. What I need from you are the biometric elements, your fingerprints, retinal scan, and voice confirmation." "I won't help you," Michael stated flatly. "Commander, please. We're beyond such cliches." Vargas leaned forward. "You misunderstand your role tonight. You're not here as an adversary to be broken. You're here as a witness. To what? To the beginning of a new era on the border." Vargas's eyes gleamed with genuine excitement. For too long, cartels have fought over scraps, drug routes, human trafficking, petty corruption, small thinking. Tonight, we seize control of something far more valuable. Information. La Fantasma isn't just a patrol boat. It's the command node for the entire next-generation border surveillance network. Michael felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drugs in his system. The prototype isn't fully integrated yet. It's still in testing. "A convenient fiction your government tells itself," Vargas replied. "My sources in the defense contractor confirmed that La Fantasma already has full access protocols installed. Once we unlock them, we'll control every camera, drone, and sensor along a 100-mile stretch of border. We'll know where every agent is positioned, every vulnerability in your defenses. We'll see everything, while remaining invisible ourselves." Michael's training took over, filing away each piece of information while searching for weaknesses in Vargas's plan. The cartel leader was revealing too much. too confidently. Either he was absolutely certain of success, or he never intended for Michael to leave the island alive. "Why tell me all this?" Michael asked, buying time as the effects of the drug began to subside. His body had always processed chemicals quickly, a quirk of metabolism that had saved his life during an exposure to nerve agents in his 30th year of service. "Because I want you to understand what you've lost," Vargas said simply. "Your legacy, Commander, will be enabling Thelagest intelligence breach in Border Patrol history. Every death that results, every kilogram of drugs that crosses, every human being trafficked, all of it will be your responsibility." Michael let his head droop, feigning greater impairment than he felt. "You're assuming I care about my legacy." "Oh, I know you do." Vargas's voice dropped to a near whisper. "I've studied you for 8 years. I know about your wife Clara, your estrangement from your son David, who resents your absence during his childhood, your nightmares about the men lost under your command. I know that your sense of duty is the only thing holding you together in retirement. Without it, you're just an old man waiting to die." The personal details hit Michael like physical blows. How had Vargas learned so much? The implications were disturbing. Surveillance, informants close to him, perhaps even infiltration of Coast Guard or Border Patrol personnel records. Before he could process this, one of Vargas's men called out from the helm. "Approaching the rendezvous point, Jefe." Vargas checked his watch. "Right on schedule. Prepare for transfer." Through the windshield, Michael could see a larger vessel waiting in the distance, a luxury yacht incongruous in these waters. As Phantasma drew alongside, he caught a glimpse of sophisticated communications equipment on the yacht's upper deck, far beyond what a pleasure craft would need. "Your new command center?" Michael asked. "Temporary headquarters," Vargas corrected. "From here, we'll make our way to the island facility where the real work begins." As his men secured lines between the vessels, Vargas turned back to Michael with a thoughtful expression. "You know, in another life, we might have worked well together. We're not so different. Both strategists, both willing to make hard choices, both betrayed by the institutions we served." "I was never betrayed by my country," Michael countered. "No? Then why did they rush to replace you with younger, less experienced commanders? Why did they shelve your recommendations for border security? Why did they deny your request for extended benefits for your men injured in that firefight 8 years ago?" Vargas shook his head. "Your loyalty is admirable but misplaced." The yacht loomed above them now, its crew extending a boarding ramp. 2 of Vargas's men hauled Michael to his feet and pushed him toward it. "Welcome aboard the Santa Muerte," Vargas said with mock ceremony. "I think you'll find it more comfortable than your fishing boat." As they forced him up the ramp, Michael caught sight of something that made his heart skip a beat. A familiar silhouette on the yacht's bridge. Female, military posture, watching the proceedings through binoculars. For a moment, he thought it might be Elena coming to his rescue. But as the figure turned, he realized with shock that he recognized her Lieutenant Maria Santos, one of his own officers from his final years of service, a trusted team member who had access to his personnel files, his mission reports, and who had apparently been working for Vargas all along. The betrayal struck deeper than any physical blow. If Vargas had turned one of his officers, who else might be compromised? Who could Michael trust now? As if reading his thoughts, Vargas smiled. "Ah, you've noticed Lieutenant Santos, one of my most valuable investments. She sends her regards. By the way, says you were an excellent commander, very predictable in your routines and security protocols." They forced Michael onto the yacht's main deck, where more armed men waited. The opulence of the vessel stood in stark contrast to the deadly seriousness of its occupants, cartel soldiers with military-grade weapons and tactical gear. "Secure him in the study," Vargas ordered, "and prepare for departure. We should reach the island before dawn." As they dragged him below deck, Michael caught one last glimpse of La Phantasma, the vessel he had helped design to protect American waters. Now in the hands of the enemy. Whatever happened next, he knew this night had already changed the balance of power on the border, and somewhere out there, Elena Vasquez was racing into a trap, unaware that the corruption ran deeper than any of them had imagined. Captain Elena. Vasquez slammed her fist against the dashboard as the Border Patrol helicopter banked sharply over the Rio Grande. The transponder signal from La Phantasma had vanished entirely after leading them on a wild goose chase for 40 minutes. "It was a decoy," she told the pilot. "They must have cloned the signal." "What's our move, Captain?" the pilot asked, hovering over the dark waters. Elena studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. "Take us back to the original coordinates where Commander Reeves was last in contact. They wanted us away from there, which means that's where we need to be." As the helicopter changed course, Elena's secure phone buzzed. "Deputy Director Harmon, her direct superior and Theman who'd taken over after Michael's retirement. Tell me you have him, Harmon said without preamble. Negative, sir. We were following false signals, requesting additional air support and maritime units. Denied, Harmon replied, his voice tight. You need to return to headquarters immediately. This operation is being reclassified. Elena frowned. Sir, Commander Reeves is out there, possibly in hostile hands. We can't just… That's precisely why you're being recalled, Harmon cut in. Reeves is a civilian who inserted himself into an active criminal operation without authorization. This is now a matter for the FBI's anti-corruption unit. Anti-corruption? Elena's confusion turned to anger. Sir, with all due respect, Commander Reeves is not corrupt. He's one of the most decorated. His banking records show 3 deposits of $50,000 each over the past month from an offshore account linked to the Nuevo Laredo cartel, Harmon stated flatly. His access codes were used to disable La Fantasma's tracking systems before it was stolen, and he was observed meeting with known cartel associates last week in Brownsville. Elena felt as though the air had been sucked from the helicopter's cabin. That's impossible. The evidence says otherwise. Return to base, Captain. That's an order. The line went dead, leaving Elena staring at her phone in disbelief. Something was very wrong. The Michael Reeves she knew would never betray his country, never work with the cartels he'd spent his career fighting. The timeline didn't make sense either. How could evidence have been assembled so quickly? She turned to the pilot. Change of plans. Take me to Marker 23, then return to base without me. Captain, I can't just leave you. You can and you will, Eleanor said firmly. Tell them I ordered you back and stayed to secure evidence. I'll take full responsibility. The pilot hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. Yes, ma'am. Meanwhile, aboard the Santa Muerte, Michael Reeves sat in a leather chair in what appeared to be a luxurious study. His hands were still bound, but the zip ties had been replaced with more comfortable, though equally secure, leather restraints, attached to the chair's arms. The drug was wearing off faster than his captors had anticipated, his mind clearing even as he pretended continued impairment. The door opened and Lieutenant Maria Santos entered, now dressed in expensive civilian clothes rather than her Border Patrol uniform. She dismissed the guards with a nod, then turned to face her former commander. I wondered when you'd come to gloat, Michael said, his voice deliberately slurred. Santos poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter, setting one on the table beside him. I'm not here to gloat, Commander. I respected you. Still do. In many ways. Spare me. How long have you been working for Vargas? She took a sip of her whiskey, considering the question. Since before I joined the service, my family in Nuevo Laredo, they were given a choice. Either I work for the cartel, or my younger siblings disappear. It wasn't a difficult decision. So everything was a lie. Your service, your loyalty, not everything. She sat across from him. The missions we ran, the lives we saved at sea, that was real work that mattered. But you never understood the realities of the border, Commander. You saw everything in black and white. Law versus criminals. Good versus evil. The truth is muddier. Michael studied her face, searching for the officer he thought he'd known. And Vargas. What's his reality? Alejandro understands power. The old cartels are dinosaurs, fighting over territory like street gangs. He's building something different. A sophisticated operation that doesn't need violence to succeed. She leaned forward. Do you know why we took La Fantasma? The real reason. He mentioned the surveillance network. Santos nodded. That's part of it. But the larger goal is leverage. Information is more valuable than drugs. With control of the border surveillance system, Vargas can make certain people and certain shipments invisible. That's worth billions to the right clients. Not just cartels, but corporations, intelligence agencies, even your own government officials who need deniability. Michael's eyes narrowed. Our own people are involved in this? Why do you think authorization for your rescue was denied so quickly? Santos smiled without humor. Right now, evidence is being planted suggesting you've been on Vargas's payroll for months. By morning, you'll be the disgraced former commander who betrayed his country for cartel money. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. Not just a cartel operation, but corruption within Border Patrol itself, perhaps reaching to the highest levels. The implications were staggering. Who? He demanded. Who's compromised? Santos shook her head. That information might keep me alive if things go wrong. But I'll give you this much. It goes higher than Deputy Director Harmon. Before Michael could respond, the door opened again and Alejandro Vargas entered, now dressed in an immaculate white linen suit. He glanced between them with amusement. Reminiscing about old times, he asked. How touching. Santos stood immediately. Just confirming what we discussed, sir. And? The drug is wearing off faster than expected. His metabolism is processing it efficiently. Vargas studied Michael with new interest. Impressive for a man your age, but it changes nothing. He turned to Santos. Prepare the equipment. I want access to the system within the hour after we reach the island. She nodded and left without looking back at Michael. Vargas took her vacated seat, picking up the untouched whiskey glass and offering it to Michael. Can you manage with your restraints, or shall I help you drink? I'll pass, Michael replied coldly. Vargas shrugged and took a sip himself. You know, Commander, I've imagined this moment for 8 years. In my darkest times, during the surgeries to reconstruct my face and shoulder after your bullet tore through me. The thought of revenge kept me alive. He leaned back, studying Michael with clinical detachment. But now that you're here, I find myself more interested in your expertise than your suffering. The man who nearly killed me is also the man who helped design the very system in need to control. Fate has a sense of humor. If you think I'll help you access classified systems, you're delusional, Michael stated. Oh, I don't need your voluntary cooperation. Santos was correct about one thing. My operation has evolved beyond crude violence. We have much more sophisticated methods now. Vargas reached into his jacket and removed a small device that looked like a Bluetooth earpiece. This, for instance, military-grade neurostimulation technology acquired from a former DARPA researcher with a gambling problem. He turned the device in the light. Applied correctly, it bypasses the conscious mind and accesses procedural memory. You won't be able to resist providing the access codes and biometric authentication because your brain won't register it as a betrayal. You'll simply perform the tasks your muscle memory knows so well. Michael felt a flash of genuine fear. He'd heard of such technology. Experimental, dangerous, but theoretically effective. If Vargas had acquired a working version, no amount of resistance training would help him. Even if you get access, Michael said, buying time as he tested the strength of his restraints. The system has fail-safes. Unauthorized use triggers automatic shutdown and alerts headquarters, which is why we need to work quickly, Vargas agreed. We'll have approximately 12 minutes between initial access and system recognition of anomalous commands, enough time to install our backdoor and withdraw without detection. A crew member appeared at the doorway. Sir, we're approaching the island. ETA 5 minutes. Vargas stood, straightening his jacket. Have the commander ready for transfer immediately, upon docking, and alert the technical team to prepare the interface. Left alone momentarily, Michael redoubled his efforts to free himself. The leather restraints had some give, but not enough for him to slip his hands through. He scanned the room for anything within reach that might serve as a tool or weapon, but the designers of his prison had been thorough. Through the porthole window he caught his first glimpse of their destination, a small private island with a modernist structure built into the rocky coastline. Unlike the gaudy mansions favored by old-school cartel leaders, this facility looked almost corporate, with clean lines and minimal visible security. The perfect headquarters for Vargas's new generation cartel. As the yacht slowed for its approach to the private dock, Michael made a decision. If he couldn't escape now, he would need to play along long enough to understand the full scope of Vargas's operation and the extent of the corruption within Border Patrol. Eleanor was still out there, possibly walking into a trap laid by their own people. Somehow, he needed to warn her. The door opened, and 2 guards entered to release his restraints and escort him from the room. As they moved through the yacht's lavish interior toward the exit, Michael caught sight of sophisticated communications equipment being packed away by technicians. This wasn't just a luxury vessel, it was a mobile command center. On the upper deck, Vargas waited by the boarding ramp, looking out at his island with undisguised pride. Beautiful, isn't it? Self-sufficient power, satellite communications, and completely off-official maritime charts. The perfect place to launch the future of border operations. You mean the future of your criminal enterprise, Michael corrected. Vargas smiled indulgently. Semantics, Commander. By this time tomorrow, the line between law enforcement and criminal enterprise on the border will be considerably blurred. Now, shall we proceed? The tide waits for no man, as I believe you Coast Guard types like to say. As they descended to the dock, Michael took careful note of their surroundings. Guard positions, security cameras, potential escape routes. His chances were slim, but he'd faced worse odds before. Whatever happened in the facility, he was determined that Vargas would not succeed in his plan to compromise border security. What the cartel leader didn't know was that Michael Reeves had one final card to play, a security protocol he'd insisted on when designing La Fantasma, one that wasn't in any official documentation. a last resort measure that could render the entire system useless if triggered properly. The question was whether he could implement it before Vargas's technology stripped away his ability to resist. Elena Vasquez dropped silently into the shallow water near marker 23, the helicopter already disappearing into the distance behind her. She'd insisted on being dropped off a quarter-mile from her target coordinates to avoid detection, choosing to swim the remaining distance in her tactical wetsuit. Her secure phone remained deliberately off. If her suspicions were correct, her own communications could be compromised. Whatever was happening tonight went beyond a simple boat hijacking. The speed with which Michael had been branded a traitor, the immediate shutdown of rescue operations, the convenient evidence of corruption, none of it added up unless someone, high in the command chain, wanted Michael gone. As she reached the small rocky outcropping that had been Michael's last known location, Eleanor activated her night vision goggles and scanned the area. No immediate signs of struggle, but the water around the rocks showed multiple boat wakes, recent activity, multiple vessels. Her trained eye caught something reflecting moonlight beneath the surface. Diving down, she retrieved a waterproof case, wedged between rocks. Michael's emergency kit, standard protocol for all his operations, official or otherwise. She'd once teased him about his paranoia in always hiding backup gear. Now she silently thanked him for it. Inside the waterproof container, she found a backup satellite phone, a loaded compact Glock 26, extra ammunition, a tactical knife, a first aid kit, and most importantly, a small tracking device. She recognized it immediately. The paired transmitter to Michael's watch, an off-book system they'd developed for high-risk operations where official channels couldn't be trusted. She activated the tracker, and after a tense moment, a faint signal appeared, moving southeast toward the Gulf. Michael was alive. At least for now. Her satellite phone buzzed with an incoming call. Deputy Director Harmon again. She hesitated, then answered. Vasquez, where the hell are you? The pilot reported you refused direct orders. I'm securing evidence, sir, she replied carefully. Found something interesting at Reeves's last known location. A pause. What kind of evidence? Hard to say over an open channel, sir, but it suggests Commander Reeves may not be working with the cartel after all. Another pause, longer this time. Return to base immediately, Captain. That's a direct order. Your judgment is compromised by your personal relationship with Reeves. My judgment is fine, sir. And my personal relationship with Commander Reeves has always been strictly professional. That's not what your personnel file suggests, Harmon countered. The psychological evaluation after the Gulf operation 8 years ago noted your unhealthy admiration and potential romantic attachment to your commanding officer. It was the reason you were passed over for promotion twice before I intervened. Elena felt a cold anger building. Those evaluations were supposed to be confidential, and the characterization was a deliberate misrepresentation of her respect for Michael as a mentor. Sir, with all due respect, is character assassination really your priority right now? A prototype vessel with classified systems has been stolen, and a decorated former commander is missing. Careful, Captain, Harmon warned. Your career is hanging by a thread. I've dispatched a team to your location. They'll either find you preparing to return to base, or they'll place you under arrest for insubordination. The line went dead. Elena checked the tracker again. Michael's signal was moving steadily southeast, already miles away. She had perhaps 20 minutes before Harmon's team arrived. Not enough time to pursue Michael directly, but enough to gather intelligence. She opened the satellite phone's secure browser and connected to a private server Michael had set up years ago, accessible only to him and a handful of trusted officers. If he'd been investigating something before his capture, the information would be there. Meanwhile, at Vargas's island facility, Michael was being led through a surprisingly modern complex that resembled a tech startup more than a cartel headquarters. Clean lines, minimalist furniture, and young professionals in casual business attire working at computer stations. Only the armed guards at key positions betrayed the facility's true nature. Impressed? Vargas asked, noting Michael's surprised expression. The new cartel doesn't operate from jungle hideouts or gaudy mansions. We're a modern enterprise. You can dress it up however you want, Michael replied. It's still a criminal organization built on human suffering. Vargas shrugged. Philosophical debates can wait. We have work to do. They entered what appeared to be the facility's nerve center, a circular room with multiple workstations arranged around a central holographic display currently showing the Gulf Coast and Rio Grande Valley. La Fantasma had been brought directly to a concealed dock beneath the building, visible on one of the monitoring screens. Bring the interface online, Vargas ordered a technician, and prepare the commander for the procedure. 2 guards forced Michael into a chair that uncomfortably resembled a dentist's seat, securing his arms and legs with built-in restraints. A technician approached with the neurostimulation device Vargas had shown him earlier. "This won't hurt," the man assured him, in accented English. "But you may experience disorientation and memory gaps afterward." "Wait," Michael said, stalling. "Before we start, I want to know something, Vargas. How did you turn Santos? Money? Threats?" Vargas, supervising the preparation of equipment across the room, glanced over. "Neither. I gave her what your government never could. The truth about her father's disappearance. Border Patrol claimed he abandoned his post and fled to Mexico with cartel money. In reality, he discovered the same corruption you've stumbled into and was eliminated for it." "You're saying our own people killed a Border Patrol agent?" "Not personally, of course. They contracted it out, to me, as it happens, before I understood the bigger picture." Vargas approached, studying Michael carefully. "That was 15 years ago. When I recognized his daughter applying to the academy, I saw an opportunity. She became my most valuable asset, driven by the desire to uncover who really gave the order to kill her father." Michael processed this revelation. If true, it meant the corruption within Border Patrol wasn't recent. It was entrenched, systemic, dating back at least 15 years. "Who?" Michael demanded. "Who ordered it? The same person who conveniently discovered your supposed cartel connections today," Vargas replied. "The man who's built his career on appearing to fight cartels while selectively allowing certain operations to proceed unhindered." "Harmon," Michael whispered, the pieces falling into place. Not just a deputy director now, but positioned to take over the entire Border Patrol within a year when the current director retired. "Precisely, though he was merely a sector chief then." Vargas confirmed. "We've had a profitable arrangement for years. He allows specific corridors to remain open for our operations. We ensure his reputation as a cartel fighter remains intact by sacrificing smaller competitors. And now he wants more. A controlling interest in my operation in exchange for access to all Border Patrol tactical information. Hence tonight's demonstration with La Fantasma. Once we prove we can control the surveillance network, our partnership evolves to the next level." Michael felt sick. The corruption was worse than he'd imagined. Not just a few bad agents, but a coordinated conspiracy reaching to senior leadership. "Why tell me all this? You're just going to kill me anyway." Vargas seemed genuinely surprised. "Kill you, Commander? That was never the plan. You're far too valuable. The neurostimulation will access your knowledge without harming you. Afterward, you'll be returned to American waters with evidence of cartel captivity, beaten but alive. Given the planted evidence of your corruption, your testimony about tonight will be dismissed as desperate attempts to deflect blame. You'll spend years fighting accusations while we operate freely." The technician finished calibrating the device and moved to attach it to Michael's temple. "One moment," Vargas said, stopping him. "I want to check on Captain Vasquez's status first." He moved to a communication station where Lieutenant Santos was monitoring multiple screens. "Update. She's gone off-grid," Santos reported. "Ditched her official comms and found Reeves's backup equipment, including the unofficial tracker. So she can trace him here," Vargas mused, not sounding particularly concerned. "And Harmon? He's sent a team to intercept her, but they won't reach her before she gets the signal." "She's good, sir. Better than we anticipated." Vargas considered this development. "Let her come. In fact, help her. Leave just enough breadcrumbs. I want her to find us, but not before we've completed the system. Access." "Sir?" Santos seemed confused. "Why would we want her to find us?" "Because, Lieutenant, this operation was never solely about gaining access to border surveillance." Vargas smiled coldly. "It's about exposing the corruption within Border Patrol itself, with credible witnesses." He returned to Michael, who had been straining to hear their conversation. "You see, Commander, you and I ultimately want the same thing, to eliminate the corruption that's poisoned border security. We simply have different motivations and methods." "You expect me to believe you're doing this out of some sense of justice?" Michael asked incredulously. "Partially justice, partially pragmatism," Vargas replied. "The old system of bribed officials and compromised agents is unsustainable. For my business to truly evolve, I need stability and predictability, not the chaos of competing corrupt factions. By exposing Harmon and his network, I clear the board for a more sophisticated arrangement." Before Michael could respond, an alarm blared through the facility. A technician called out from a monitoring station. "Sir, we have a problem with La Fantasma. The systems are initiating some kind of security protocol." Vargas turned sharply. "What protocol?" "Shut it down." "We can't, sir. It's locked us out completely." Michael allowed himself a small smile. The dead man's switch. his final failsafe built into La Fantasma's operating system. If the vessel remained disconnected from Border Patrol's secure networks for more than 6 hours, or if certain access patterns were detected, it would initiate a complete system lockdown, requiring physical security keys held only by the Border Patrol director to reactivate. Vargas noticed Michael's expression and grabbed him by the collar. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything," Michael replied truthfully. "The boat did. Standard security protocol for compromised vessels." Vargas's face contorted with rage, the careful veneer of civilization slipping. "Fix it. Now." "I can't. No one can without the director's physical keys." For a moment, Michael thought Vargas might strike him, but the cartel leader quickly regained his composure, straightening his jacket. "Then we accelerate our timeline," he decided. "Begin the neurostimulation immediately. Extract whatever access codes and bypasses he knows. Prepare La Fantasma for controlled destruction once we've harvested the data we need." As the technician approached again with the device, Michael realized his gambit had only made things worse. The dead man's switch had protected the boat's systems, but now Vargas would attempt to strip his mind for alternatives, then destroy the evidence. His only hope was Elena. If she could follow his tracker signal before the procedure wiped his memory of the facility's security details. But even if she reached the island, what could one Border Patrol captain do against Vargas's small army of guards and technicians? The cold metal of the neurostimulator pressed against his temple as he desperately tried to focus on one final contingency plan, a way to sabotage the procedure itself. As the device activated, sending its first pulses into his brain, Michael concentrated on a single memory, one buried so deep that not even this technology should be able to easily access it. The memory of what really happened the night he confronted Vargas 8 years ago in the Gulf, a truth he'd hidden from everyone, even Elena, a truth that might be his only leverage if he survived the procedure with his mind intact. Pain lanced through Michael's skull as the neurostimulation device probed his memories. Images flashed through his consciousness. Access codes, security protocols, biometric sequences for La Fantasma's systems. He fought against the intrusion, focusing on his secret memory as an anchor. But the technology was relentless. "He's resisting," the technician informed Vargas. "Brain activity suggests deliberate memory suppression." Vargas leaned over Michael, studying him with cold calculation. "Impressive, Commander. Few subjects maintain this level of cognitive control under stimulation." Increase the amplitude. As the device's power elevated, Michael's defenses began to crumble. Key sequences spilled from his lips against his will. Security overrides and access protocols that would give Vargas what he wanted. The technicians worked frantically, inputting the codes into their system. "We're in," one announced triumphantly. "Accessing the surveillance network now." On the central display, the border region came alive with data. Every patrol unit's position, surveillance drone feeds, motion sensor grids. The complete security infrastructure of a 100-mile stretch of border laid bare. "Download everything," Vargas ordered. "We have limited time before the system recognizes the intrusion." Michael struggled against his restraints, the neurostimulator still pulling information from his unwilling mind. But between the extracted data, something unexpected slipped out. Coordinates and a string of numbers that meant nothing to the technicians. "Hold," Vargas commanded, recognition flashing across his face. "Those coordinates, what are they?" The technician checked the system. "Nothing significant shows on our maps. Appears to be a location in the Gulf, about 30 miles offshore." Vargas turned to Michael, whose eyes were now unfocused from the procedure. "Those coordinates, what happened there 8 years ago?" Despite the device's control, Michael managed a pained smile. "The truth." Vargas's expression hardened. He gestured to Santos. "Cross-reference those coordinates with Coast Guard records from 8 years ago." Now, as Santos accessed the database, alarms suddenly blared throughout the facility. A security officer burst into the room, his face tense. "Sir, we have incoming. Fast boat approaching from the northeast. Evaded our perimeter sensors until it was less than a mile out." "Captain Vasquez," Vargas concluded. "She's found us sooner than expected." He turned to his security team. "Prepare our defenses, but I want her captured alive." Santos called from her station. "Sir, I found the coordinates in the records. 8 years ago, the Coast Guard intercepted a yacht at that location, your yacht. But the official report says you were presumed dead after the firefight." "That's the official story," Vargas agreed. "The real question is what Commander Reeves knows that isn't in that report." He turned back to Michael. "What really happened that night?" The neurostimulator had begun to lose effectiveness as Michael's brain chemistry adapted. Through the haze of pain, he focused on the memory he'd protected. His leverage. You weren't the only one with corrupt connections, Michael managed to say. That night, I was ordered to eliminate you regardless of surrender, to make sure you never testified about your government partners. Vargas went still. Who gave that order? The same person who helped fake your death afterward, who made sure the search was called off quickly, who gave you a new identity and protected your operations for years in exchange for eliminating rivals. Harmon, Vargas whispered, the truth dawning on him. You thought you were using him, Michael continued, his voice stronger now. But he's been controlling you from the beginning. You're his creation, his personal cartel leader kept on a leash. The revelation hit Vargas like a physical blow. His carefully constructed narrative of revenge and strategic genius crumbled as he realized he'd been a pawn in someone else's game all along. Before he could respond, the facility shook with an explosion. The security officer shouted into his radio, "Perimeter breach. Multiple points of entry." Multiple? Vargas spun toward the security monitors. You said one boat. The screens showed not just Elena's approach, but 3 additional vessels converging on the island from different directions. The largest bore Coast Guard markings. Impossible, Santos breathed. How did they find us? All communications were secure. Michael laughed weakly. You forgot about Clara. Your wife? Vargas looked confused. My wife, who spent 40 years married to a Coast Guard commander, Michael corrected. Who knows every protocol, every backup plan. The moment I didn't check in at our pre-arranged time, she would have contacted the one person it trusts completely outside the Border Patrol. Santos's eyes widened in understanding. Admiral Jackson, my former commanding officer, Michael confirmed. Currently head of Coast Guard Special Operations. A man with his own resources, outside Border Patrol's chain of command, outside Harmon's influence. Another explosion rocked the facility, closer this time. The lights flickered momentarily. Vargas's face transformed, calculation replacing shock. In that moment, Michael saw the true depth of the man's intelligence and adaptability, qualities that had helped him survive and rebuild after their confrontation years ago. Change of plans, Vargas announced calmly. Santos, initiate protocol. Obsidian, everyone else prepare for immediate evacuation. As his men rushed to comply, Vargas turned back to Michael. It seems our reunion must be cut short, Commander, but you've given me something far more valuable than revenge. The truth about my position in this game. He removed a key from his pocket and unlocked Michael's restraints. Consider this a professional courtesy. One pawn to another. Michael stared in confusion as Vargas freed him. You're letting me go? I'm adapting to new information, Vargas corrected. Harmon is the true enemy for both of us. I suspect we'll have a common purpose in the near future, exposing his network. Santos returned with a tablet. Protocol Obsidian initiated. The data package is transmitting to all designated media outlets and law enforcement agencies. What data package? Michael demanded. Evidence of Harmon's corruption, Vargas explained. Financial records, communication logs, video of meetings. Everything I've collected over years as insurance. I was saving it for leverage, but it serves a better purpose now as a distraction. The facility rocked with another explosion, much closer. The lights went out completely for several seconds before emergency power engaged. Time to go, Vargas said, heading for a concealed door at the back of the room. He paused, looking back at Michael. Tell Admiral Jackson I send my regards. And Commander, our business is finished. Whatever revenge I sought died with tonight's revelations. As Vargas and his core team disappeared through the hidden exit, Michael struggled to his feet, still disoriented from the neurostimulation. The remaining guards were too busy preparing for evacuation to pay him much attention. He made his way to a computer terminal and quickly accessed the security systems. What he saw on the monitors stunned him. The Coast Guard vessels were conducting a coordinated assault on the facility, led by a figure he recognized immediately, Admiral Jackson himself, directing operations from the command boat. On another screen, he spotted Elena breaching the eastern perimeter of the compound, moving with tactical precision through the chaos. Michael activated the facility's intercom. Attention Coast Guard and Border Patrol personnel. This is Commander Michael Reeves, the facility's primary target, Alejandro. Vargas is escaping through underwater tunnels on the west side. However, be advised that the stolen vessel, La Fantasma, contains critical intelligence and should be secured immediately. He released the button, knowing that his former colleagues would understand his priorities. The stolen prototype contained technologies too valuable to lose, even if it meant Vargas might escape in the confusion. As he turned to find his own exit, the door burst open. Elena Vasquez stood in the doorway, tactical gear covered in dust and grime from the breach. Her weapon raised until she recognized him. Commander, she breathed. lowering her gun. "You look terrible." Michael managed a weak smile. "You're a sight for sore eyes, Captain. But we need to move quickly. This place is coming apart." "Admiral Jackson is securing the perimeter," she reported, moving to support him as his legs threatened to give way. "And you're not going to believe who's with him. Try me." Director Phillips. Himself. Apparently your wife reached out to him directly, bypassing Harmon entirely. When Jackson showed him the evidence you'd been collecting on internal corruption, he authorized this operation personally. Michael absorbed this revelation as they made their way through corridors, now filling with smoke from the ongoing assault. "And Harmon, under arrest as we speak," Elena confirmed. "The evidence was overwhelming once someone actually looked. But that's not the strangest part. What could be stranger than the Deputy Director of Border Patrol being arrested for cartel cooperation?" Elena guided him around a corner, toward an exit where Coast Guard personnel were securing the area. The data dump that exposed him. Detailed. Files started arriving at every major law enforcement agency simultaneously about 30 minutes ago. Internal Affairs, FBI, DEA, everyone received comprehensive evidence of Harmon's corruption dating back 15 years. "Vargas," Michael explained. "His insurance policy. He released everything once he realized Harmon had been manipulating him all along." They emerged into the night air, where medical personnel immediately moved to assist Michael. As they helped him toward a waiting boat, Michael caught sight of La Fantasma being secured by Coast Guard officers. "The prototype. Is it intact?" he asked Elena. "Systems locked down but physically undamaged," she confirmed. "Whatever you did with that dead man's switch worked perfectly. They couldn't access anything beyond basic navigation." Michael nodded, in relief, then winced as the motion aggravated his pounding headache. "They used some kind of neurostimulation device on me, tried to extract access codes and security protocols." Elena's expression hardened. "The doctors will check you over. But sir, what exactly happened in there? How did Vargas get away?" "I let him go," Michael admitted. "Or rather, I prioritized securing La Fantasma over pursuing him." "You what?" Elena stepped back in shock. "After everything he's done?" Michael met her gaze steadily. "The technology on that boat is worth more than one cartel leader's capture. Besides, Vargas just did us a tremendous service by exposing corruption that we might never have rooted out otherwise. So he just walks away? Back to running his cartel? For now," Michael conceded. "But he's lost his protection, his leverage, within our government, and he knows we'll be coming for him eventually." As medical personnel began treating his injuries, Michael gazed back at the facility, now partially engulfed in flames. The night had not gone as anyone had planned. Not Vargas, not Harmon, not even himself. But perhaps that was fitting for what would likely be his final mission. Admiral Jackson approached, his familiar imposing figure silhouetted against the chaos behind him. "You always did know how to throw a retirement party, Michael. Sorry about the mess, sir." Jackson waved it off. "Worth it to expose Harmon and his network. The corruption went deeper than anyone suspected. At least 12 senior Border Patrol officials implicated so far. And Vargas? In the wind for now, but his organization has been significantly disrupted. We've seized 3 of his major communication centers and arrested over 30 cartel members tonight." Michael nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering him since he'd first realized the extent of the conspiracy. "How did we miss it, Jack? How did corruption take root so deeply under our watch?" Jackson's weathered face showed his age in that moment. "We were fighting the wrong war, Michael. While we focused on drugs and smugglers, the real threat was wearing a badge and sitting in budget meetings." He placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "But that changes now. Director Phillips has authorized a complete overhaul of Border Patrol leadership and security protocols. With you advising, I hope." Jackson smiled. "With both of us advising, if you're willing to postpone that retirement a little longer." Before Michael could respond, a Coast Guard officer approached urgently. "Admiral, we've got a situation. The locked-down systems on La Fantasma just activated remotely. Someone's bypassed the dead man's switch." Michael struggled to his feet, despite the medic's protests. "That's impossible. The only override is the director's physical security key," Jackson finished grimly. "Which means we still have a problem." 3 days after the raid on Vargas's island facility, Michael sat in a secure conference room at Coast Guard headquarters in Washington, D.C. His body was still recovering from the neurostimulation procedure, occasional migraines and memory flashes plaguing him at unpredictable intervals. But his mind remained sharp enough for the task at hand. Across the table, Director Phillips of Border Patrol looked every bit as exhausted as Michael felt. The exposure of Harmon's corruption network had thrown the agency into chaos, with investigations ongoing and public trust at an all-time low. The security key used to unlock La Fantasma's systems, Phillips said, cutting straight to the point. We've confirmed it was an exact duplicate of mine. Molecular analysis shows it was crafted with exceptional precision, virtually indistinguishable from the original. Which means someone with prolonged access to your key made the copy, Michael concluded. Phillips nodded grimly. My executive assistant, Karen Mills, 22 years of service, completely clean record. She disappeared the night of the raid. Her apartment was empty, packed up methodically, not in a hurry. This was planned. Admiral Jackson, who had been silently pacing by the window, turned to face them. The question is what they managed to extract from La Fantasma before we re-establish control of the systems. Elena, who had been granted special clearance to attend the meeting, spoke up from her position near the door. Preliminary analysis suggests they were primarily interested in the advanced facial recognition database. They downloaded the entire system, including the experimental pattern matching algorithms. Why facial recognition specifically? Phillips wondered. Michael had been pondering this question since they'd discovered the breach. Because it's the cornerstone of the next generation border security system. With that technology and its underlying algorithms, they could potentially identify undercover agents, track specific individuals across multiple crossing points, even predict patrol patterns based on historical deployment data. It's worse than that, Elena added, sliding a tablet across the table. The system doesn't just recognize faces. It's designed to analyze behavioral patterns, identify relationships between individuals based on proximity data, even predict likely destinations based on previous movement history. Phillips reviewed the information with growing alarm. So Vargas now has the ability to essentially see through our surveillance network. Not Vargas, Michael corrected. Think bigger. Who benefits most from compromising border security at this level? Who has the resources to place a mole in the director's office for years? This goes beyond cartels. Jackson nodded his agreement. Intelligence suggests at least 3 foreign governments would pay billions for this technology. Russia, China, possibly Iran. So we're not just dealing with Vargas anymore, Phillips concluded. We could be facing a national security breach of unprecedented proportions. And we still don't know who Vargas is working with now that Harmon's network has been exposed, Elena pointed out. He could be freelancing, selling to the highest bidder. The room fell silent as they contemplated the escalating stakes. What had begun as a stolen patrol boat had evolved into potential compromise of national border security. Michael broke the silence. We need to find Karen Mills. She's the link between Harmon's operation and whoever is pulling the strings now. Every federal agency is looking for her, Phillips assured him, but so far nothing. It's like she vanished. Michael's satellite phone buzzed with an incoming message. He checked it, then stood abruptly. I need to take this privately. In the hallway outside, Michael opened the encrypted message. The sender was listed only as AV, Alejandro Vargas. The content was brief. The woman you seek is in Belize, Blue Marlin Resort, under the name Sarah Winters. But she's not working for me. We were both pawns in a larger game. Watch your back, Commander. Not all admirals retired with their honor intact. Michael stared at the message, ice forming in his stomach. Could Vargas be suggesting that corruption reached even into the highest levels of the Coast Guard, into Jackson's domain? Before he could process this fully, Elena joined him in the hallway. Everything okay? No, he admitted, showing her the message. But we might have our first real lead. Elena read it twice, her expression darkening. You think he's implying Admiral Jackson is compromised? I don't know what to think anymore. But we need to find Mills without tipping our hand to anyone in this building. I can be in Belize by tonight, Eleanor offered immediately. Michael shook his head. Not alone. I'm coming with you. With all due respect, sir, you're still recovering from neurostimulation. The doctors said. The doctors don't understand what's at stake, Michael cut her off. Besides, Mills knows me. If she's being manipulated or coerced, I might be able to reach her. Eleanor clearly wanted to argue, but recognized the determination in his face. Fine, but we do this by the book. Proper backup, full tactical plan. No, Michael countered. We can't risk involving anyone else until we know who we can trust. Just you and me. Off the books. That's not protocol. Protocol went out the window when someone duplicated the director's security key. We're in uncharted waters now. Their argument was interrupted by Admiral Jackson emerging from the conference room. Everything all right out here? Michael made a split-second decision. If Jackson was compromised, showing suspicion now would only endanger their lead. Just discussing. Next steps, sir. I think I should take some time to fully recover from the procedure before continuing with the investigation. Jackson studied him carefully. Probably wise. The doctors did recommend at least a week of rest. Captain Vasquez can handle things here in the meantime. Actually, Eleanor improvised smoothly. I was planning to escort the commander home to ensure he follows medical advice. You know how stubborn he can be about taking proper recovery time. Jackson smiled. All too well. All right, both of you take 3 days. We'll reconvene on Friday to assess where we stand. After Jackson returned to the conference room, Elena whispered, 3 days to get to Belize, find Mills, and get back without anyone knowing? Then we'd better get moving, Michael replied. And Elena, pack your sidearm. I have a feeling we're walking into something much bigger than a simple debriefing. 24 hours later, they checked into the Blue Marlin Resort, in Belize under false names, posing as a father and daughter on a fishing vacation. The upscale resort sprawled along a pristine beach, offering privacy and discretion for its wealthy clientele, the perfect place for someone to disappear. Elena scanned the open-air restaurant from behind sunglasses. No sign of her yet. Are we sure Vargas's intelligence is reliable? No, Michael admitted. But it's the only lead we have. As the afternoon progressed, they maintained their cover, alternating between the beach and the resort's public areas, always watching for Karen Mills. By evening, Michael's patience was wearing thin, and the lingering effects of the neurostimulation were causing a persistent headache. Let's check the marina, he suggested. If she's planning to move again, she'll need transportation. The resort's private marina housed dozens of luxury yachts and fishing boats. As they casually strolled along the docks, Michael suddenly tensed. 3 o'clock. Blue sundress. Elena glanced discreetly in the indicated direction. A woman matching Mills's description was speaking with a boat captain, her back to them as she gestured toward the open water. It's her, Elena confirmed, and she appears to be arranging transportation. Wait here, Michael instructed. Cover the dock exit. I'll approach from the waterside so she can't escape that way. As Michael circled around, Mills finished her conversation and turned to leave, directly toward him. Their eyes met, and recognition flashed across her face, followed immediately by fear. Karen, Michael called calmly, approaching with measured steps. We need to talk. She glanced frantically toward the dock exit, where Eleanor was now casually blocking the path. Commander Reeves, this isn't what you think. Why don't you tell me what it is then? He gestured to a nearby bench, isolated enough for a private conversation. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded and sat, her posture rigid with tension. They told me you were dead, that the cartel had executed you. Who told you that? My handler. I've been working for Naval Intelligence for 15 years, Commander. Undercover, placed in Border Patrol to monitor corruption from within. Michael kept his expression neutral despite his surprise. Naval Intelligence doesn't have jurisdiction over domestic border operations. They do when foreign intelligence services are involved, she countered. Russia has been cultivating assets within Border Patrol since before Harmon. He was just their most successful recruitment. If you're Naval Intelligence, why run? Why steal the director's security key and compromise La Fantasma's systems? Mills looked genuinely confused. I didn't steal anything. I was ordered to provide access to certain systems as part of a sanctioned counterintelligence operation. Everything was authorized at the highest levels. By whom specifically? She hesitated before answering. Admiral William Stanley. Michael felt as though the ground had shifted beneath him. Admiral Stanley, Jackson's predecessor and mentor, the man who had shaped Coast Guard intelligence operations for a generation before his retirement 5 years ago. Stanley is working with the Russians? Michael asked incredulously. No, Mills shook her head emphatically. He's running a deep cover operation to expose their network. Harmon was just the tip of the iceberg. The real target is someone much higher up, someone in position to compromise national security at the highest levels. Who? Before she could answer, the crack of a rifle shot split the air. Mills jerked backward, a red stain blossoming on her blue sundress. Michael instinctively dove for cover, dragging her with him behind a concrete planter. Sniper! He shouted to Elena, who was already moving, weapon drawn, scanning rooftops. Mills clutched at her chest, blood seeping between her fingers. Vault! She gasped. Cayman National. Account 4479. Password. Lighthouse 22. Stay with me, Karen, Michael urged, applying pressure to the wound. Medic! We need a medic! But her eyes were already losing focus. Tell Stanley, Icarus is compromised. The breach goes all the way to... Her final words were lost as her body went limp. Michael checked for a pulse. Finding nothing. In the distance, sirens wailed as resort security responded to the shooting. Elena reached them, crouching low. Shooter's gone. We need to move now. Local authorities will have questions we can't answer. Michael gently closed Mills's eyes. She was naval intelligence working for Admiral Stanley. Stanley? He retired years ago. Apparently not completely. Michael searched Mills's pockets, finding a small encrypted thumb drive which he quickly pocketed. She mentioned a vault at Cayman National Bank, account 4479. Evidence? Let's hope so, because right now, we're flying completely blind. The sirens grew louder as they slipped away from the marina, using the growing crowd of onlookers as cover. Within minutes, they were in their rental car, heading away from the resort. The airport will be watched, Elena noted. We'll need another way out. Michael nodded grimly. I know someone with a plane in Belize City, former Coast Guard pilot who retired down here. If he's still around, he might be our ticket home. And then what? Then we find Admiral Stanley and figure out what the hell is going on, because someone just killed a naval intelligence officer. To prevent her from telling us who's really behind all this. As they drove through the gathering darkness, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that they were now targets in a game much larger and more dangerous than anything involving Vargas or border security. This had evolved into something that threatened national security at the highest levels, and somewhere in Washington, the real puppet master was watching their every move. The small private plane bucked in the turbulence as they approached the Florida coastline. Michael gripped his armrest, eyes closed against another wave of migraine pain, an after effect of the neurostimulation that seemed to be getting worse, not better. You okay? Elena asked from the seat beside him. I've been better, he admitted, but we need to focus on our next move. In the cockpit, Michael's former colleague Jim Brennan expertly guided the aircraft through the rough weather. He'd asked remarkably few questions when Michael had appeared at his hangar in Belize City, requesting an immediate flight to the United States. Old loyalties still meant something. After confirming no one was following them, they had used the 6-hour flight to review the contents of Mills's thumb drive. What they found was disturbing. Evidence of a sophisticated operation code-named Sentinel that appeared to involve penetration of multiple U.S. security agencies by foreign intelligence assets. The scope is staggering, Eleanor said, reviewing the files again on her laptop. Border Patrol, Coast Guard, even elements of the FBI and Customs, all compromised to varying degrees, and all connected to this figure, Icarus, Michael noted. Some kind of high-level handler or coordinator, but no indication of Icarus's actual identity, just that they have access to top-secret security systems and classified deployment information. Michael rubbed his temples, trying to think through the pain. Mills said the operation was sanctioned by Admiral Stanley to expose Russian assets. But if that's true, why was she assassinated? And why did Vargas tell us where to find her? Maybe Vargas isn't working with the Russians, Elena suggested. Maybe he has his own agenda in exposing this network. Or maybe he's being manipulated, just like the rest of us. Michael looked out the window at the dark water below. We need to find Stanley. He's the only one who can make sense of this. According to official records, he maintains a residence in Annapolis, retired there after leaving the service. Too obvious, Michael shook his head. If he's running a deep cover operation against Russian intelligence, he wouldn't be at his listed address. We need to think like him. Michael closed his eyes, recalling everything he knew about William Stanley. Brilliant strategist, notoriously paranoid about operational security, and dedicated sailor. His boat, Michael said suddenly, the Vigilant. He always said when he retired for real, he'd live on that boat. No fixed address, difficult to track. Great. Except the eastern seaboard has thousands of marinas. He could be anywhere. Michael smiled despite the pain. Not anywhere. Stanley has a ritual. Every year on the anniversary of his wife's death, he visits the Naval Academy Cemetery in Annapolis. She's buried there. That anniversary is tomorrow. So we head to Annapolis and stake out the cemetery. No, we access the bank vault first. Whatever evidence Mills secured there could be crucial, especially if something happens to Stanley before we reach him. Jim's voice came over the intercom. 20 minutes to landing, folks. Got a message from air traffic control. Weather's deteriorating fast. Might be a rough touchdown. Michael exchanged looks with Elena. Weather's clear according to the radar. Someone knows we're coming, she concluded, checking her weapon discreetly. Jim, Michael called to the cockpit. Change of plans. Can you put us down at the secondary location we discussed? The old Coast Guard station. That runway hasn't been maintained in years. It's our best option. We can't risk the main airport if someone's waiting. Jim hesitated only momentarily. Roger that. Adjusting course now. Better buckle up tight. This will definitely burrow. The landing was indeed rough. A bone-jarring touchdown on a neglected runway at an abandoned Coast Guard auxiliary station 20 miles down the coast. As the plane taxied to a stop, Michael scanned the perimeter for any sign of surveillance or waiting vehicles. Looks clear, Elena reported, peering through night vision binoculars. But we should move quickly. Jim shut down the engines and joined them in the cabin. That's as far as I go, Michael. You've got 12 hours before a need to file a flight plan for the return trip, or the authorities will start asking questions I can't answer. Michael clasped his old friend's hand. Understood. And thank you. Don't thank me yet. You still need transportation. Already arranged, Michael assured him, nodding toward a weathered storage building at the edge of the runway. If Stanley's information is still good, there should be an emergency vehicle cache in that structure. Sure enough, the building contained a nondescript sedan with civilian plates, keys hidden in the magnetic box exactly where Stanley's contingency protocols had specified. The Admiral's paranoia and meticulous planning were proving useful even years after his official retirement. By dawn, they had reached Grand Cayman, using a series of private charters and cash transactions to avoid detection. The gleaming headquarters of Cayman National Bank stood in stark contrast to their disheveled appearance. After nearly 24 hours of continuous travel, "Let me do the talking," Michael instructed, as they approached the bank's private client entrance. These places run on discretion and proper credentials. The bank manager, a polished woman named Ms. Covington, greeted them with professional courtesy. That didn't quite mask her suspicion at their appearance. Michael presented the account number and authentication codes from Mills's dying words. "Of course, Mr. she prompted. "Richards," Michael supplied smoothly. "James Richards. My associate and I need to access Safety Deposit Box 4479 immediately." After verifying the credentials, which appeared to pass muster, Ms. Covington led them to a private room with their quested box. "Take all the time you need," she said, leaving them alone with the container. Inside was a single sealed envelope and a small recording device. Eleanor stood guard at the door while Michael opened the envelope, finding a handwritten letter from Admiral Stanley. "If you're reading this, it means Karen Mills is likely dead, and I may be compromised as well," the letter began. "The operation to expose Russian assets within our security apparatus has uncovered something far more dangerous than we anticipated. Project Sentinel is not a Russian operation, it's domestic, authorized at the highest levels of our government." Michael's blood ran cold as he continued reading. "The project's true purpose is to create controlled security vulnerabilities that allow certain parties to move people and materials across our borders without detection. Not for espionage, but for profit. The scope of corruption extends to individuals with direct access to the president. Trust no one with official authority." The letter continued with operational details and contingency plans, culminating in a meeting location, a safe house in rural Virginia, where Stanley claimed to maintain a secure facility outside official channels. The recording device contained video evidence, surveillance footage of secret meetings, financial transactions, and most disturbingly, Admiral Jackson himself meeting with individuals identified as Russian intelligence operatives. "This can't be right," Elena whispered, watching over Michael's shoulder. "Admiral Jackson? He's been your mentor, your friend, which would make him the perfect handler," Michael replied grimly. "Someone I'd never suspect, someone with complete access to Coast Guard operations and intelligence. If he's Icarus, then returning to Washington is walking into a trap." Michael pocketed the device and letter. "We need to get to Stanley's safe house immediately." They left the bank through a service entrance, constantly checking for surveillance. Michael's instincts, honed by decades of operations, told him they were being watched, but he couldn't pinpoint from where. "We're going to need better resources," he told Elena as they hailed a taxi. "Weapons, communications, transportation, all off the grid." "I might know someone," Elena offered. "Former Border Patrol tactical officer who went private sector. Lives outside Richmond, not far from Stanley's safe house. Can you trust him?" "Her," Elena corrected. "And yes, completely. She's my sister." Michael raised an eyebrow in surprise. "I didn't know you had a sister in the service." "Half-sister, technically. Different last name. Kept off my official records deliberately. We've maintained separation for operational security." "Smart," Michael acknowledged. "Make the call, but use code phrases only. Nothing explicit." 6 hours later, they were driving through the Virginia countryside in a reinforced SUV, provided by Elena's sister, Maria Delgado. The vehicle came equipped with encrypted communications, tactical gear, and weapons, all with untraceable provenance. "She doesn't do anything halfway," Michael observed, examining the high-quality equipment. "Private security pays better than government work," Eleanor replied, "especially when your clients include foreign dignitaries and corporate executives with legitimate security concerns. As they approached the coordinates from Stanley's letter, Michael's migraine returned with crippling intensity. Flashes of memory from the neurostimulation procedure burst through his consciousness, but now with new context. "Stop the car," he gasped, clutching his head. Elena pulled over immediately. "What's wrong?" "The neurostimulation. It wasn't just extracting information. They implanted something." Michael fought through the pain, focusing on the memory flashes, coordinates, authentication codes. "I'm a walking breach." Implanted memories? Is that even possible? Theoretically. The technology was experimental, but Michael's voice trailed off as realization dawned. "That's why Vargas let me go. I'm the Trojan horse. My presence at Stanley's safe house could compromise everything." Elena, process this alarming possibility. If they implanted something, we can't risk leading them to Stanley. But we can't just abandon the mission either, Michael countered. This conspiracy goes to the highest levels. Stanley might be the only one who can expose it. Elena considered their options. What if we split up? "I go to Stanley's safe house while you create a diversion." Michael shook his head. "Too risky. If I'm being tracked, they'll know something's wrong the moment we separate." He thought for a moment. "We need a way to neutralize whatever tracking or triggers they implanted without losing the intelligence we've gathered." Elena's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "It's from my sister. She says we're being followed. Satellite surveillance detected on our vehicle." "How long?" "Since we left Richmond. Professional operation. Government-grade technology." Michael made a decision. "We need a medical facility with neural imaging capabilities, somewhere off the grid where we can determine exactly what they did to my brain." "Maria knows someone, former military neurologist who runs a private clinic. Very discreet, no questions asked. It's about an hour from here. Tell her to set it up, but we need to ditch this vehicle and any electronics. They could be compromised." 20 minutes later, they abandoned the SUV in a shopping mall parking lot and transferred to a delivery van driven by one of Maria's associates. The neurologist's clinic turned out to be a sophisticated facility hidden within a nondescript office. Building Dr. Abernathy, a stern-faced woman with military bearing, wasted no time on pleasantries. Captain Vasquez explained the situation. "We'll need to do a full neural scan immediately." As Michael lay in the MRI machine, Dr. Abernathy studied the results with growing concern. "There's evidence of targeted stimulation in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, areas associated with memory formation and decision-making." "Can you determine what they implanted?" Elena asked. "Not specifically, but the pattern suggests a trigger response mechanism. Certain stimuli could activate implanted behaviors or memory retrieval." She pointed to areas of unusual activity on the scan. "This isn't standard neurostimulation. This is cutting-edge technology, military-grade or better." "Can you disable it?" Michael asked. Dr. Abernathy hesitated. "Possibly, through targeted electromagnetic pulse therapy. But I must warn you, it could affect legitimate memories as well. We can't be precise about what gets disrupted." Michael closed his eyes briefly. "Do it. We can't risk me being used as an unwitting asset." While the doctor prepared the equipment, Elena stepped closer to Michael. "Are you sure about this? You could lose critical memories, operational knowledge." "I'm already compromised," he replied grimly. "Better to lose some memories than betray Stanley and everything he's working for." The procedure took nearly 2 hours. A carefully calibrated electromagnetic treatment designed to disrupt the implanted triggers without causing broader neurological damage. When it was complete, Michael felt oddly lighter, as though a weight had been lifted from his mind. The migraines had subsided, but certain memories seemed fuzzy, difficult to access. "Did it work?" he asked Dr. Abernathy. "Preliminary scans show disruption to the implanted patterns," she confirmed. "But we won't know for certain until you encounter whatever triggers they established." "Which we hope never happens," Elena added. Dr. Abernathy provided them with a secure satellite phone. "This connects directly to my private network. If you experience any unusual symptoms or memory episodes, contact me immediately." Back on the road in yet another vehicle, this time a weathered pickup truck, they continued toward Stanley's safe house with renewed caution. The rural Virginia landscape grew more isolated as they followed the coordinates, eventually turning onto an unmarked dirt road that wound through dense forest. According to the letter, the entrance should be disguised as an abandoned hunting cabin, Eleanor said, scanning the tree line. The cabin, when they found it, appeared genuinely derelict. Roof partially collapsed, windows broken, vegetation reclaiming the structure. Only the faintest tire tracks suggested recent human presence. "Stay alert," Michael cautioned as they approached. Stanley would have security measures. As if on cue, a hidden speaker crackled to life. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Michael recognized the voice immediately. Admiral Stanley. It's Commander Michael Reeves. Karen Mills sent us. Lighthouse 22. A long pause followed before a different voice responded. Female. Authoritative. Approach the north side of the cabin, hands visible. Any weapons should be holstered. They complied, moving cautiously to the indicated position. A section of ground beside the cabin slid open, revealing a stairway leading underground. At the bottom stood a woman Michael hadn't seen in years. Captain Rebecca Winters, Stanley's longtime intelligence officer and one of the most respected analysts in the Coast Guard. Commander, she greeted him with a curt nod. You look like hell. Good to see you too, Rebecca, Michael replied. Is Stanley here? Her expression tightened. Follow me. The underground facility was far more extensive than the dilapidated cabin above suggested. A fully equipped command center with communications arrays, surveillance monitors, and what appeared to be a small but complete intelligence operation. Admiral William Stanley sat at a central workstation, studying multiple screens of data. At 72, he remained imposing, tall, broad-shouldered, with piercing blue eyes that had lost none of their intensity. But he had aged dramatically since Michael had last seen him, his formerly dark hair now completely white, deep lines etched into his face. Michael, he greeted, rising slowly. I hoped you wouldn't find this place. For your own safety. Karen Mills is dead, Michael reported without preamble. Assassinated in Belize after telling us to find you. Stanley closed his eyes briefly, genuine grief crossing his features. She was one of my best, loyal to the end. He gestured for them to sit. What else did she tell you? That Operation Sentinel isn't what it appears. That the corruption goes to the highest levels. And that Admiral Jackson might be involved. Stanley nodded grimly. All true. Though Jackson isn't just involved, he's Icarus, the operation's central coordinator. Despite the evidence they'd already seen, hearing it confirmed so definitively hit Michael hard. Why? What could possibly motivate him to betray everything he stood for? The oldest motivation there is, power, Stanley replied. Jackson always resented being passed over for Commandant of the Coast Guard. When certain private interests approached him with an offer to build his own power base outside official channels, he succumbed to temptation. What private interests? A consortium of defense contractors, multinational corporations, and corrupt government officials who benefit from controlled border vulnerabilities. They call themselves the Continuity, an arrogant reference to their belief that they represent the true continuity of power, regardless of who holds elected office. Elena, who had been quietly assessing the facility, joined the conversation. And Vargas? How does he fit into this? Alejandro Vargas was originally one of their assets. A cartel leader they could control, who would eliminate competitors while allowing their own operations to function unimpeded. But something changed. Recently, he's gone rogue, actively working against the continuity. That explains why he helped us, Michael noted. He sent us to find Mills in Belize. Stanley's eyebrows rose in surprise. Vargas contacted you directly. Interesting. He's playing an even more complex game than I realized. What's the continuity's ultimate objective? Elena asked. It can't just be profit from smuggling operations. Control, Stanley said simply, of information flow, of strategic resources, of who and what crosses our borders. They've been building shadow infrastructure for years, surveillance systems, personnel networks, even military capabilities outside. Governmental oversight. Michael absorbed this disturbing information. And La Fantasma? The prototype vessel? A testbed for next-generation surveillance technology they plan to implement nationwide. With it, they could essentially create invisible corridors through our borders, able to see everything while ensuring their own operations remain undetected. So when Vargas stole it, he disrupted years of careful planning, Stanley confirmed, which is why they responded with such force. The raid on his island facility wasn't just about recovering stolen technology, it was about eliminating a threat to their entire operation. Rebecca Winters, who had been monitoring communications, interrupted urgently. Admiral, we have movement on the perimeter sensors, multiple vehicles approaching from the South Access Road. Stanley moved quickly to a surveillance station. How many? At least 3 tactical teams, heavily armed. Government vehicles, but no official markings. They found us, Michael realized. But how? I underwent treatment to neutralize any implants from the neurostimulation. Stanley's expression darkened. The treatment may have neutralized direct neural triggers, but there are other methods of tracking. Your blood, for instance. My blood. Advanced nanotracker technology. Microscopic devices injected into the bloodstream that emit signals too weak to detect with standard equipment. The continuity has been developing it for years. Elena checked her weapon. How long until they reach us? 10 minutes, maybe less, Rebecca reported. Standard containment formation. They're professionals. Stanley made a rapid series of decisions. Rebecca, initiate protocol sundown. Transfer all data to the secure servers and prepare for facility shutdown. He turned to Michael and Elena. We have an escape tunnel that exits 2 miles north. You'll take the evidence we've compiled and get it to Director Phillips directly. No intermediaries. What about you? Michael asked, already knowing the answer. I'll remain to ensure the data transfer completes and to buy you time. Stanley's expression was resolute. This facility was always a one-way mission for me, Michael. I'm dying anyway. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. Doctors gave me 3 months, 6 weeks ago. The revelation stunned Michael. Sir, we can all get out. No, we can't. The tunnel can't be accessed once the facility lockdown initiates. Security measure to prevent compromise. Someone has to stay to trigger it manually. Stanley gripped Michael's shoulder firmly. This isn't a debate, Commander. You have your orders. Rebecca handed them each a small encrypted drive. Redundant copies of everything we've gathered. Evidence of the continuity's operations. Personnel. Financial networks. Enough to dismantle their entire structure if it reaches the right hands. The access codes and security measures are on this, Stanley added, passing Michael a weathered compass that he recognized immediately. Stanley's lucky compass from his first command. Embedded microchip in the casing. Phillips will know how to access it. Elena checked the surveillance feed. They're deploying perimeter teams. We need to move now. One last thing, Stanley said, his voice dropping. Jackson isn't just running this operation. He's preparing something big. Codename Peregrine. We haven't been able to determine exactly what it is, but the operational timetable shows implementation within the next 72 hours. We'll stop it, Michael promised. Stanley nodded once, then turned to Rebecca. Captain, Winters will guide you to the tunnel entrance. Go now. As they followed Rebecca through the facility's winding corridors, Michael glanced back at Admiral Stanley. The legendary commander now hunched over his terminal, making his final stand. Their eyes met briefly, an unspoken understanding passing between them. This was goodbye. The escape tunnel was narrow and roughly hewn, clearly designed for function rather than comfort. Rebecca led them to a heavy steel door with a complex locking mechanism. This will take you to an abandoned ranger station, she explained, entering a code. There's a vehicle hidden in the shed behind it. Keys under the floor mat. You're not coming? Eleanor asked. Rebecca shook her head. My place is with the Admiral. She handed Michael a final item, a satellite phone unlike any he'd seen before, quantum encrypted, untraceable. The only person who can receive transmissions from it is Director Phillips. His direct access code is programmed in. The facility's lights flickered, and a distant thud signaled the attack had begun. Rebecca checked her weapon. They've breached the outer perimeter. You have 5 minutes before this passage seals permanently. Michael grasped her hand briefly. Good luck, Captain. Save it for yourselves, she replied with grim determination. You're heading into the heart of the conspiracy now. Trust no one. Except Phillips. And even then, verify first using the protocols in the data package. As the door sealed behind them, Michael and Elena moved swiftly through the tunnel, the sounds of gunfire already echoing faintly through the rock. Admiral Stanley and Rebecca Winters were making their final stand, buying them precious time with their lives. Do you think Phillips is clean? Elena asked as they hurried forward. If Jackson is compromised, Stanley seemed certain. Michael replied, but we'll follow verification protocols. Trust, but verify. The tunnel eventually opened into a small concrete chamber beneath an abandoned ranger station, just as Rebecca had described. After checking for surveillance, they recovered the hidden vehicle, a nondescript jeep with off-road capabilities, and began the journey back towards civilization. Michael checked the satellite phone. We need to reach Phillips before Jackson realizes what we have. Once he knows Stanley shared the information, he'll implement whatever Peregrine is immediately, Eleanor finished grimly. And we still don't know what we're trying to prevent. As they drove through the gathering darkness, Michael found himself thinking about Clara. He hadn't contacted her since the night on the Rio Grande, knowing any communication could endanger her. She would be worried sick by now, possibly even told he was missing or dead. We need a secure location to review the data before contacting Phillips, he decided. Somewhere off the grid, but with enough technology to access the drives. Eleanor considered their options. My sister's facility would be secure, but it might be compromised now that they know we contacted her. I know a place, Michael said after a moment's thought. An old Coast Guard listening post decommissioned 10 years ago. Stanley and I used it for unofficial operations occasionally. If it hasn't been discovered, it should still have functional equipment. The listening post, hidden within an unassuming farmhouse on the Virginia coast, appeared untouched when they arrived shortly before dawn. Using Stanley's compass, which contained not just a microchip, but an actual key embedded in its casing, Michael unlocked the hidden entrance to the facility beneath the house. Backup generators should still work, he told Elena, as they descended into darkness. If Stanley maintained the protocols, sure enough, the generators hummed to life when activated, illuminating a compact but comprehensive intelligence center. Frozen in time, the technology was outdated by current standards, but functional, and more importantly, physically disconnected from any networks that could be monitored. They connected the encrypted drives to the standalone systems and began reviewing the evidence Stanley had compiled. What they found exceeded even their worst expectations. Project Peregrine, Elena read from the screen, a coordinated operation to simultaneously disable legitimate border security systems while activating a shadow network under continuity control. She scrolled through implementation details. Michael, this isn't just about smuggling or surveillance. This is a complete takeover of national border infrastructure. Michael studied the operational timeline with growing alarm. It's scheduled for implementation tomorrow at 600. Less than 24 hours from now. Once activated, they'll have total control over what crosses our borders. They could bring in anything or anyone without detection. And the first planned operation, Elena's voice faltered as she read further. Transportation of strategic assets to key metropolitan areas. These aren't drugs or weapons. These are people, operatives of some kind. Infiltration teams, Michael concluded grimly. The beginning of something much larger. He reached for the quantum-encrypted phone. We need to contact Phillips immediately. As he prepared to make the call, a detail on one of the screens caught his attention. A personnel file for Admiral Jackson, including his most recent known location. According to Stanley's intelligence, Jackson was currently aboard a Coast Guard vessel in the Gulf of Mexico, the very same area where Michael had confronted Vargas 8 years earlier. The coincidence seemed too perfect to ignore. What was Jackson doing in those specific waters? And why now, with Peregrine about to activate? The answer came as Michael accessed another file. Details of a scheduled rendezvous between Jackson and what was listed only as primary asset delivery. The coordinates matched almost exactly with the location of their confrontation 8 years ago. It's all connected, Michael murmured. The night I supposedly left Vargas to die, something else happened there. Something I either didn't see or don't remember. Could it be related to the implanted memories? Eleanor suggested. Possibly. Or perhaps to memories they attempted to suppress. Michael made a decision. We contact Phillips with what we know about Peregrine, but we also need to intercept Jackson at those coordinates. Whatever he's receiving out there is crucial to their plans. Elena checked the logistics. We'd need air transport to reach the Gulf in time, and we'd be walking into their territory without backup. Not necessarily without backup, Michael countered, an idea forming. There's one person who knows those waters as well as I do, who has resources outside official channels, and who also has reason to want to stop the continuity. Vargas, Elena realized. You want to contact Alejandro Vargas. He sent us to Mills for a reason. He's playing his own game against the continuity. Right now our interests align. Elena looked skeptical. Allying with a cartel leader. That's a massive risk. So is allowing Peregrine to activate. Michael picked up the quantum-encrypted phone. First, we contact Phillips with everything we have on the operation and the continuity. Then, we find a way to reach Vargas. As Michael input the access code for Director Phillips, he knew they were stepping into the most dangerous phase of the operation. If Phillips was compromised, if their transmission was intercepted, or if Vargas couldn't be trusted, they would be walking directly into a trap with no escape. But the alternative, allowing the continuity to seize control of national border security, was unthinkable. Sometimes, Michael reflected grimly, the only choice is which impossible path to take. Dawn broke over the Gulf of Mexico, painting the horizon in fiery orange as Michael surveyed the waters through high-powered binoculars. Beside him on the deck of Vargas's sleek command vessel, Eleanor maintained a vigilant watch on their surroundings, still not entirely comfortable with their temporary alliance. There, Michael pointed to a Coast Guard cutter in the distance. That's Jackson's vessel, the Arlington. Vargas joined them, his scarred face impassive as he studied the cutter through his own optical equipment. The cartel leader had responded to their outreach with surprising speed, agreeing to provide transportation and resources for the interception operation. As agreed, Commander, my men will create a diversion to draw away their escort vessels, Vargas stated. But the Arlington, itself is your responsibility. I won't risk direct confrontation with a Coast Guard cutter. Understood, Michael acknowledged. Once we're aboard, we'll locate and secure whatever asset Jackson is receiving. Your only job is to extract us afterward, with the asset, and get us to the coordinates for the rendezvous with Phillips. Vargas nodded once. And in return, I receive immunity for past offenses and protected witness status. If everything checks out, yes. Director Phillips has provisionally agreed to your terms. The conversation with Phillips had been tense but productive. After verifying his identity using Stanley's protocols, they'd shared the evidence of the continuity's existence and Project Peregrine. Phillips had immediately initiated countermeasures to protect legitimate border security systems, while mobilizing trusted personnel to prepare for the confrontation with the continuity's network. Jackson's escort vessels are maintaining standard patrol formation, Elena reported, studying the tactical display. 2 high-speed interceptors, fully armed. My diversionary team is in position, Vargas confirmed. On your signal, Commander. Michael took a deep breath, mentally reviewing their plan one final time. They would approach in a civilian vessel, ostensibly a fishing boat experiencing mechanical difficulties, while Vargas's teams created incidents requiring the escort vessel's attention. Once alongside the Arlington, Michael and Elena would board, using Stanley's command codes, locate the mysterious asset, and extract it before Jackson realized what was happening. Execute, Michael ordered. Vargas relayed the command, and within minutes, reports began coming in of multiple vessels in distress at strategically selected locations, just beyond visual range of the Arlington. As predicted, Jackson dispatched his escort vessels to investigate, leaving the cutter temporarily isolated. Their fishing boat, crewed by 2 of Vargas's most trusted men disguised as civilians, approached the Arlington with apparent engine trouble. Michael and Eleanor remained below deck, prepared for boarding. Coast Guard vessel Arlington, this is fishing vessel Marie Eleanor, the captain transmitted. Experiencing engine failure and taking on water, requesting immediate assistance. The response came quickly. Marie Elena, this is Arlington, maintain position. We're dispatching a boarding team to assess your situation. Perfect, Michael murmured. They'll send a small team rather than bringing us aboard directly, easier to neutralize quietly. When the Coast Guard boarding team, 4 officers in standard inspection gear, transferred to their vessel, Michael and Eleanor were ready. Using non-lethal tactics, they quickly subdued the unsuspecting team, securing them below deck. Coast Guard uniforms and ID, Elena noted, collecting the officers' credentials. Should get us aboard without immediate suspicion. Dressed in borrowed Coast Guard attire, they transferred to the Arlington via the boarding team's launch. The cutter's crew, seeing what appeared to be their colleagues returning, raised no immediate alarm. Once aboard, Michael accessed a terminal, using one of Stanley's administrative codes. According to the ship's manifest, there's a secure cargo hold on the lower deck, unusual for this class of vessel. Must be a custom modification. That has to be where they're keeping the asset, Elena agreed. But we'll need higher clearance to access it, or we create a distraction that draws security away from that section. Michael quickly formulated a plan. Fire alarm in the forward. Compartments should redirect personnel and temporarily disable electronic locks on emergency bulkheads. As they moved purposefully through the vessel, Michael was struck by the surreal nature of their situation. Back aboard a Coast Guard cutter, wearing the uniform, but now operating against his former colleague and mentor. Every corridor, every procedure was familiar, yet he was an intruder, a threat to the very institution he had served for decades. Elena triggered the fire alarm system in a forward storage area, creating the necessary distraction. As predicted, emergency protocols activated, and crew members rushed to respond, leaving their path to the secure hold relatively clear. 2 guards remaining, Elena whispered as they approached their target, armed with non-standard weapons. Definitely not regular Coast Guard. Michael nodded grimly. Continuity security. We take them simultaneously. Silent takedowns if possible. With practiced efficiency, they neutralized the guards and gained access to the secure hold using the emergency override codes. Inside, instead of the weapons or technology they had expected, they found a single occupant, a man in his early 30s, with close-cropped dark hair and intelligent eyes that showed no surprise at their arrival. Commander Reeves, the man greeted calmly. Right on schedule. Michael froze, his weapon trained on the stranger. Who are you? The asset you're looking for, he replied simply. My designation is Peregrine Actual, but you can call me Daniel Cross. Eleanor kept her weapon ready, covering the entrance. What exactly are you? I'm a specialized intelligence operative, former CIA deep cover, recruited by Admiral Jackson for the Continuity's Executive Action Team. Cross stood slowly, hands visible. And I've been expecting an extraction. Though I anticipated Admiral Stanley himself, not his proxies. Michael's confusion must have shown on his face because Cross continued. Stanley didn't tell you. I'm his deep cover asset within the continuity. I've been feeding him information for the past 18 months. That's not possible, Elena countered. Stanley never mentioned a mole within the continuity. Operational security, Cross explained. My identity was compartmentalized, known only to Stanley himself. Even his trusted Captain Winters was kept in the dark. Michael maintained his aim. Prove it, the compass he gave you, Cross said. It doesn't just contain data on continuity, operations. It has verification codes for his deep cover assets. Insert it into any secure terminal. Enter the phrase Vigilant Dawn, and you'll see my credentials. Michael hesitated, then nodded to Eleanor, who kept her weapon trained on Cross, while Michael verified his claim using a nearby terminal. The compass chip, when accessed with the phrase, indeed contained verification for an asset codenamed Peregrine Actual. Daniel Cross. All right, Michael conceded, lowering his weapon slightly. What exactly is Project Peregrine, and why are you being transported? Out here? I'm not being transported, Cross corrected. I'm being eliminated. Jackson discovered my connection to Stanley 3 days ago. This rendezvous isn't for asset delivery, it's for my execution and disposal. Deep water, no witnesses, body never, recovered. The revelation shifted their understanding of the situation entirely. Then what is the actual Peregrine operation? Elena demanded. The name is dual purpose, Cross explained quickly. I was Peregrine when reporting to Stanley, but the operation itself is a coordinated strike against key border security infrastructure. Physical attacks, not just cyber intrusion. They're planning to eliminate the entire legitimate command structure and replace it with continuity personnel. Michael's blood ran cold. When? It's already begun, Cross said grimly. The Arlington isn't just here for my execution, it's Jackson's mobile command center for coordinating the first wave of attacks. Before they could respond, alarms blared throughout the vessel. Not fire alarms this time, but security alerts. Their presence had been discovered. We need to move, Elena urged, checking the corridor. Extraction point in 4 minutes. Michael made a swift decision. Change of plans. We need to access the command center and disrupt Jackson's coordination of the attacks. That's suicide, Cross objected. The command center will be heavily guarded, and Jackson himself is a formidable opponent. It's our only chance to delay Peregrine until Phillips can implement countermeasures, Michael insisted. Elena, get Cross to the extraction point. I'll handle Jackson. Like hell, Elena countered. We stay together. Cross can guide us to the command center through maintenance passages, right? She fixed the operative with a determined stare. Cross nodded reluctantly. There's a service corridor that bypasses main security, but we'll still face Jackson's personal security detail at the command center itself. Then we'd better move fast, Michael decided, checking his weapon. Lead the way. The next few minutes were a tense journey through the Arlington's restricted areas, avoiding search parties and security personnel. Cross proved his value immediately, navigating the vessel's modified layout with insider precision. They reached an access panel near the command center, just as an announcement echoed through the ship. All personnel, this is Admiral Jackson. We have intruders aboard. Security teams to designated containment positions. Command center staff remain at battle stations. He's initiating attack protocols, Cross interpreted. Once those orders go out to continuity cells, then we stop. Him before that happens, Michael stated, checking his watch. Vargas's extraction team will be in position for exactly 7 more minutes. We breach, we stop the transmission, we extract. Clean and simple. Elena gave him a knowing look. When has anything involving you ever been clean and simple? Despite the gravity of their situation, Michael found himself smiling briefly. Fair point. New plan. We breach, we improvise, we hopefully extract. Cross accessed the panel, revealing the command center beyond. Inside, Admiral Jackson stood at a central console, surrounded by officers and security personnel. Tactical displays showed multiple targets across the southern United States, border stations, surveillance posts, command centers. 60 seconds to coordinated strike, one of the officers announced. All continuity cells reporting ready status. Begin final authentication sequence, Jackson ordered. Authorization Icarus Prime. Michael turned to Eleanor and Cross. Cover me. I'm going to confront him directly. Before they could object, he stepped through the access panel into the command center, weapon raised. Belay that order, he commanded in his best command voice. The room froze as all eyes turned to him. Admiral Jackson showed only momentary surprise before his expression settled into cold calculation. "Commander Reeves," he acknowledged. "I should have known Stanley would send you. Always his favorite attack dog. Step away from the console, Admiral," Michael ordered. "Project Peregrine ends now." Jackson's security detail had drawn their weapons, creating a tense standoff as Elena and Cross emerged from the access panel to flank Michael. "Do you even understand what you're interfering with?" Jackson asked, seemingly unconcerned by the weapons pointed at him. "The continuity isn't some criminal conspiracy, Michael. It's the future of national security, adaptive, independent of political whims, effective." "It's treason," Michael countered bluntly. "And you're finished. Director Phillips has already implemented countermeasures based on Stanley's evidence. Your network is being rounded up as we speak." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Jackson's face. "Stanley's dead. His facility was neutralized." "But his evidence wasn't," Elena interjected. "Full data package safely delivered to Phillips 12 hours ago." Jackson's expression hardened. "Security teams, eliminate the intruders." What happened next unfolded in seconds that felt like hours. Jackson's security team opened fire as Michael, Eleanor, and Cross dove for cover. The command center erupted into chaos. Officers scrambling for safety, systems blaring alerts, the confined space echoing with gunfire. Michael caught glimpses of the tactical displays as he returned fire, target markers disappearing as Phillips's countermeasures took effect, continuity cells losing coordination as their command structure collapsed. "The transmission is failing," Cross shouted over the gunfire. "They've lost connectivity to the field teams." Jackson, seeing his operation unraveling, made a desperate move toward an auxiliary console, likely an independent communication system. Michael recognized tackling his former mentor just as he reached for the controls. They crashed to the floor, Jackson's considerable strength nearly matching Michael's despite their age difference. For a moment, Michael found himself staring into the eyes of the man he had admired for decades, searching for any remnant of the honorable officer he had known. "Why, Jack?" he asked as they grappled. "After everything you stood for? Because the system is broken," Jackson snarled, landing a powerful blow to Michael's ribs. "Politicians playing games while our borders remain vulnerable." The continuity offered a solution. Permanent professional security without bureaucratic interference. "At what cost?" Michael countered, blocking another strike. "American sovereignty? The rule of law? The oath we both took? Necessary sacrifices. For the greater good." Their struggle took them across the command center floor as Eleanor and Cross maintained a firefight with the remaining security personnel. Michael felt his strength waning, the accumulated injuries and stress of the past days taking their toll. Jackson sensed his advantage and pressed it, pinning Michael against a console. "You're too late anyway," he hissed. "Secondary protocols are already activating. The continuity has contingencies you can't imagine." "Maybe," Michael conceded. "But they'll face those contingencies without their leader." With a surge of effort, Michael broke Jackson's grip and delivered a precise strike to his former mentor's solar plexus, following with a disabling blow to the knee. As Jackson stumbled backward, Michael seized a fallen weapon and leveled at it. His chest. "It's over, Jack. Stand down." For a moment, it seemed Jackson might comply. Then his hand moved toward his jacket, toward what Michael instantly recognized as a concealed weapon. "Don't," Michael warned. Jackson's eyes held a mixture of defiance and resignation. "I can't surrender, Michael. You know what would happen. The continuity doesn't allow failure." "There's another way," Michael insisted. "Testify. Help us dismantle the entire network." For a heartbeat, indecision crossed Jackson's face. Then, with terrible finality, he made his choice, his hand continuing its movement toward the hidden weapon. Michael fired once. The shot echoed through the suddenly silent command center as Jackson collapsed. Michael rushed forward, disarming him and checking for a pulse. It was there, but fading rapidly. "Get a medical team," he shouted to the stunned officers who had taken cover during the firefight. Jackson's eyes found his, clarity returning to them in his final moments. "You don't understand what you've done," he whispered. "The continuity is bigger than me, bigger than all of us. We'll find them," Michael promised. All of them. A ghost of the old Jackson, the honorable officer Michael had known, seemed to surface briefly. Stanley's files, not complete. Look to the civilian sector. Defense contractors. Specifically, his voice faltered as blood bubbled at his lips. "Jack, stay with me," Michael urged. Who specifically? But Admiral Jackson's eyes had already gone distant, fixing on something only he could see. With a final, rattling breath, he was gone, taking his secrets with him. The command center was secured minutes later, loyal Coast Guard personnel responding to Elena's emergency broadcast. Cross had been wounded in the firefight, but would survive. As medical teams and security personnel swarmed the Arlington, Michael stood on the deck, watching Vargas's extraction vessel approaching. Elena joined him, her tactical gear showing the marks of intense combat. Phillips confirms Peregrine has been disrupted. Continuity cells are either neutralized or in disarray. We did it. Michael nodded absently, his mind still processing Jackson's final words. We stopped this operation. But Jackson was right about one thing. The continuity is bigger than him. This isn't over. No, Elena agreed. But we've struck the first real blow against them. We've exposed their existence. That alone changes everything. As Vargas's vessel came alongside for extraction, Michael took one last look at the Arlington. 1 week after the confrontation on the Arlington, Michael Reeves sat on the porch of his ranch-style home in Port Isabel, watching the sunrise with Clara. Beside him, the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on the nearby shore provided a soothing counterpoint to the chaos of recent days. You look better, Clara observed, studying his face. The doctors say the effects of the neurostimulation are fading. Michael nodded, sipping his coffee. The nightmares are less frequent, and the memories are starting to sort themselves out. Real, from implanted. The aftermath of Operation Peregrine had been a whirlwind of debriefings, medical examinations, and security protocols. Director Phillips had personally overseen the dismantling of the continuities network within Border Patrol and Coast Guard, while intelligence agencies worked to identify civilian connections based on the evidence from Stanley's files. Have you decided? Clara asked quietly, the question they'd both been avoiding. Michael knew exactly what she meant. Phillips had offered him an official position, Special Advisor on Border Security Integrity, reporting directly to the Secretary of Homeland Security, a role created specifically to continue the work of exposing and eliminating the continuity's influence. I told him I needed time, Michael replied, but I think we both know what the answer will be. Clara reached for his hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Just promise me one thing, Michael. No more solo missions on fishing boats at midnight. You build the proper team this time. You delegate. You come home every night. He smiled, lifting her hand to his lips. I promise. The sound of a vehicle approaching drew their attention. Elena Vasquez's government SUV came into view, dust billowing behind it on the access road. Right on time, Michael noted, checking his watch. Elena had been officially promoted to Deputy Director of Border Patrol's newly formed Internal Security Division, a unit specifically tasked with rooting out remaining continuity influence. Cross, after recovering from his wounds, had joined her team as a special advisor, his knowledge of continuity operations proving invaluable. As Elena approached the porch, Michael noted her formal attire, dress uniform rather than her usual tactical gear. You look official, he commented. Congressional testimony this afternoon, she explained. They're establishing a special committee to investigate the continuity. Director Phillips wants both of us there. Both of us. I haven't even accepted the position yet. Elena smiled. He seemed pretty confident about your answer. Said something about you being constitutionally incapable of walking away from an unfinished mission. Clara laughed softly. He has you there. Michael shook his head in resignation. I suppose I should change into something more suitable for Capitol Hill. Before that, Elena said, her expression turning serious, there's an update you should know about. Vargas has disappeared. Michael frowned. Disappeared? What about his immunity agreement? He attended the first 2 debriefing sessions, provided valuable intelligence about continuity operations in Mexico, then vanished before the 3rd meeting. Left behind a data package with additional information, but no explanation for his departure. He's worried, Michael concluded. The continuity may be disrupted, but they're not eliminated. He knows they'll target him for his role in exposing them. Probably, Eleanor agreed. But there's something else. The last data package included this. She handed Michael a sealed envelope with his name handwritten on the front. Inside was a single page with coordinates and a brief message. For closure. Some ghosts need to be properly laid tourist. AV. Michael studied the coordinates, recognition dawning immediately. The exact location where we confronted each other 8 years ago, where I supposedly left him to die. What do you think it means? Eleanor asked. Michael carefully refolded the note. I think he's offering answers to questions I didn't even know to ask. He glanced at Clara, seeing understanding in her eyes. This isn't over, is it? I don't think so, Clara replied gently. But maybe the next chapter doesn't have to be written in blood. Eleanor checked her watch. We should leave in 30 minutes to make the hearing. She tactfully stepped inside. To give them privacy. Michael gazed out toward the Gulf, visible as a silver line on the horizon. Somewhere out there, The truth about what really happened 8 years ago waited. A truth Vargas believed important enough to risk breaking his immunity agreement to share. "You'll go to those coordinates," Clara stated. Not a question, but a certainty. "After the testimony," Michael confirmed. "I need to know what really happened. What the continuity might have, hidden from both Vargas and me." Clara squeezed his hand. "Then find out. But remember your promise." Michael smiled at the woman who had stood beside him through decades of service, who had waited through countless deployments and missions, who understood him better than he sometimes understood himself. "I'll remember," he assured her. "No matter where this leads, I'm coming home." Inside, he changed into his formal Coast Guard uniform, now adorned with the additional insignia of his new advisory role, a position he had decided to accept even before Eleanor's arrival. As he straightened his tie and checked his appearance in the mirror, Michael reflected on the journey that had begun with a stolen patrol boat on the Rio Grande. That night had seemed like an ending, one final mission before true retirement. Instead, it had been the beginning of something far larger, a confrontation with corruption that had festered for years within the institutions he had served so faithfully. The continuity remained a threat, weakened but not destroyed. Jackson's final words echoed in his memory. "Look to the civilian sector. Defense contractors." The investigation had only scratched the surface of their network, but for the first time since that moonlit night on the river, Michael felt something he had thought permanently lost in the years of retirement: purpose. Not just the adrenaline rush of operation, but the deeper satisfaction of serving, cause greater than himself. As he prepared to leave for Washington with Elena, Michael took one last look at the Gulf from their porch. Whatever waited at those coordinates, whatever truth Vargas wanted him to find, would be another beginning, not an end. Clara joined him at the door, straightening his collar in a familiar gesture. "You know," she said with a soft smile, "for a man who's failed at retirement 3 times now, you seem remarkably content." Michael laughed, the sound surprisingly light. "Maybe I'm just not cut out for growing tomatoes." "Oh, I don't know," Clara replied, her eyes twinkling with the wisdom of 42 years of marriage to a man who could never truly leave the water. "The tomatoes were coming along nicely. They'll be here waiting when you need a break from saving the world." Together they walked to Eleanor's waiting vehicle, ready to face whatever came next. Congressional committees, remaining continuity threats, and mysterious coordinates in the Gulf that might finally provide answers to questions 8 years in the making. The journey that had begun with a hijacked Border Patrol boat had transformed into something far more complex and consequential. But Michael Reeves was, at last, exactly where he needed to be. Twilight painted the Gulf waters in deepening shades of purple as Michael guided his boat, a newer, better-equipped version of Clara's Mercy, toward the coordinates Vargas had provided. The location lay in international waters, precisely at the spot where their lives had intersected so violently 8 years earlier. 3 months had passed since the congressional testimony that had launched sweeping reforms in border security agencies. The continuity investigation had expanded to include defense contractors, private security firms, and technology companies with border security contracts. Each revelation had exposed new layers of the conspiracy, yet key questions remained unanswered. Through it all, Vargas had remained elusive, occasionally providing intelligence through encrypted channels, but never risking direct contact, until now. As Michael approached the coordinates, he maintained vigilant surveillance of his surroundings. Though he had informed Eleanor of his mission, he had come alone as specified in Vargas's instructions. A calculated risk, but one he deemed necessary for the answers he sought. The drone of another vessel's engines drew his attention to the west, where a sleek yacht materialized from the gathering darkness. Unlike the ostentatious craft that cartel leaders typically favored, this one was understated, designed for performance rather than display. A signal light flashed from the yacht, 3 short, 1 long. The recognition code Vargas had included, with the coordinates. Michael responded in kind, then guided his boat alongside as the yacht reduced speed. A familiar figure waited on the lower deck, Alejandro Vargas, dressed in simple civilian attire that belied his status. No visible weapons, no entourage. Like Michael, he had come alone. "Commander," Vargas greeted him as Michael secured his boat to the yacht. "I wasn't certain you would come." "Curiosity is a powerful motivator," Michael replied, stepping aboard. "Carefully. Breaking your immunity agreement was a significant risk. Whatever you brought me here to show must be important." Vargas nodded, gesturing toward the yacht's cabin. "It is. Perhaps the most important discovery of our mutual investigation." The cabin contained none of the luxury Michael might have expected. Instead, it had been converted into something resembling An intelligence center, with secure communications equipment and multiple computer stations. You've been busy, Michael observed. The continuity hasn't been idle either, Vargas replied, activating a display screen. They've reconstituted much of their network, adapted to the exposure of their government assets. They're more cautious now, but no less determined, I'm aware. We've been tracking their movements, intercepting communications when possible, but there are still significant gaps in our understanding. Vargas studied him thoughtfully, including what really happened that night 8 years ago, the night that connected our destinies. I've reviewed the official records, my personal logs, even underwent hypnotherapy to recover any suppressed memories, Michael acknowledged. But there are still inconsistencies, moments that don't align with the official narrative, because the official narrative was carefully constructed, not just to hide my survival, but to conceal what we both witnessed. Vargas turned to a secure safe embedded in the cabin wall, entering a complex code to unlock it. What I'm about to show you has never been seen by anyone else. I've kept it hidden as insurance, knowing its release would mean death for both of us. From the safe, he removed a weathered waterproof case containing an old-style digital video recorder. 8 years ago, I was already suspicious of my American partners. I had recording devices installed throughout my vessel, including infrared cameras for night operations. Michael felt a chill of anticipation as Vargas connected the device to the display screen. This survived the firefight, waterproof, impact-resistant, and designed to float. I recovered it weeks after the incident, once I had sufficiently recovered from my injuries. Vargas hesitated, his finger hovering over the play button. Before I show you this, understand that what you're about to see will change everything. Your understanding of that night, of the continuity's origins, and of your own role in their plans. Michael nodded. I need to know. The footage began. Grainy, night vision green, showing the chaotic moments of the Coast Guard boarding operation. Michael recognized his younger self leading the tactical team onto Vargas's yacht, the subsequent firefight unfolding exactly as he remembered. Then came the moment that had haunted him for 8 years. Vargas, wounded, falling overboard during the exchange of gunfire. In Michael's memory, he had made the difficult decision to secure the vessel and drug shipment rather than attempt a dangerous night rescue in hostile waters. But the video showed something his memory had not retained. After Vargas went overboard, a second Coast Guard vessel approached, one not documented in any official report. From it emerged 2 figures in Coast Guard tactical gear, but without standard identification. They retrieved the wounded Vargas from the water, not to rescue him, but to transfer him to their vessel. The audio, though distorted, captured a chilling exchange. Target secured. Proceeding with asset acquisition. What about Commander Reeves? He's not following containment protocol. Implement cognitive adjustment during debriefing. Standard package. He'll remember following protocol and leaving the target in the water. And the recording equipment we detected? Already scrambled. Nothing will survive. The footage continued, showing these unknown operatives administering some kind of injection to Vargas before their vessel departed, leaving the main operation still in progress. Michael watched in stunned silence as the video confirmed what he had begun to suspect. His memories of that night had been altered during what he had been told was standard debriefing. They took you, deliberately, he murmured as the footage ended, and modified my memories to cover their tracks. Yes, Vargas confirmed. I was never meant to die that night. I was being acquired, extracted from my Cartel leadership position, and repurposed as a controlled asset for what would later become the continuity, the injection. Experimental cognitive programming compound designed to create compliance triggers. They spent months conditioning me, rebuilding my identity, preparing me to serve as their perfect cartel asset, one who would eliminate competition while allowing their own operations to function unimpeded. Michael absorbed this revelation, the pieces finally aligning. But something went wrong. You broke their conditioning. A ghost of a smile crossed Vargas's scarred face. They underestimated the power of genuine hatred, Commander. My hatred for you, for what I believed you had done, provided an emotional anchor that their chemical conditioning couldn't fully override. It became the flaw in their programming, the crack through which my actual identity reasserted itself. And once you began to remember, I started investigating my partners, discovering the true nature of the continuity, realizing I was merely a pawn in their larger strategy. Vargas ejected the recording device, returning it to Michael. When I recognized La Fantasma on that patrol schedule, I saw an opportunity, not just for revenge against you, but to strike at the continuity itself. Michael stared at the device, in his hands, proof that his memories had been manipulated. that elements within his own service had been compromised years earlier than anyone had suspected. Why show me this now? Why risk your freedom when you could have just disappeared with your immunity deal? Vargas moved to the cabin window, looking out at the darkened waters surrounding them. Because the continuity is rebuilding faster than your agencies realize. They've adapted, learning from their exposure, and they've identified a new potential asset to replace Jackson, someone close to your investigation. The implication sent a chill through Michael. Who? I don't have a name, only indicators. Someone with access to the congressional investigation, someone positioned to influence the direction of your reforms. Vargas turned back to face him. The recording proves how far back their influence reaches, and how sophisticated their methods were even 8 years ago. Imagine how they've evolved since then. Michael carefully secured the recording device. This evidence is crucial. With it, we can expand the investigation, implement enhanced security protocols against cognitive manipulation, and make ourselves even bigger targets, Vargas noted grimly. Once the continuity realizes we have this evidence, they'll stop at nothing to eliminate us both. Then we work together, Michael proposed, surprising himself with the offer. Your intelligence network, our governmental authority, a coordinated effort to expose and dismantle the continuity once and for all. Vargas studied him with genuine surprise. You would trust me? After everything? Trust is a spectrum, not an absolute, Michael replied carefully. I trust your self-interest, and right now, that aligns perfectly with our mission. The continuity wants both of us eliminated. Together, we have a better chance of surviving long enough to destroy them. For a long moment, Vargas considered the proposal, his calculating mind visibly weighing options and contingencies. Finally, he extended his hand. A temporary alliance, then, until the continuity is destroyed. Michael accepted the handshake, feeling the strange circularity of fate. Their conflict had begun on these waters 8 years ago, manipulated by forces neither had fully understood. Now that conflict transformed into an unlikely alliance against a common enemy. I need to get this evidence back securely, Michael said, indicating the recording device. Eleanor needs to see it, immediately. I've arranged secure transportation, Vargas replied. One of my helicopters is standing by on an oil platform 20 miles from here. It can take you directly to a private airfield near Washington. As they prepared to depart, Michael paused on the yacht's deck, looking out at the Gulf waters now fully embraced by darkness. The night reminded him of that first encounter on the Rio Grande, the hijacked Border Patrol boat, their moat kill switch, the beginning of a journey neither he nor Vargas could have anticipated. You know, Michael said thoughtfully, when I saw La Fantasma drifting that night, I thought I was finishing something. One last mission before retirement. I never imagined it was just the beginning. Vargas nodded in understanding. Endings and beginnings are rarely as distinct as we imagine, Commander. Sometimes they're the same moment viewed from different perspectives. As Michael returned to his boat to follow Vargas to the helicopter rendezvous, he reflected on those words. The hijacking of a Border Patrol boat had led to the exposure of a conspiracy that threatened the foundations of national security. His retirement had transformed into perhaps the most important mission of his career, and his greatest adversary had become an essential ally. The waters of the Gulf, dark and mysterious beneath his vessel, held both their shared past and uncertain future. Whatever came next in their battle against the continuity, Michael knew with absolute certainty that the quiet retirement he had once envisioned was no longer his path. Some men were not meant for growing tomatoes. Some were meant to stand as guardians against threats others couldn't even perceive. As Commander Michael Reeves navigated through the darkness toward a new chapter in this unexpected journey, he embraced that purpose with a clarity that had eluded him throughout 3 failed attempts. Retirement. The sea had always been his true home. The mission had always been his true calling. And now, with the evidence secured and an unprecedented alliance formed, he would return to both. Not for ego or adrenaline, but because he was needed. Some battles chose their warriors, and he would see it through to its end, whatever the cost. Behind him, Vargas's yacht vanished into the darkness, 2 vessels again moving on separate courses, but now with a shared destination. For the former Coast Guard commander and the cartel leader who had once been bitter enemies, the real war was just beginning. And somewhere in Washington, the continuity was watching, adapting, preparing for the next phase of a conflict that would determine the future of border security and perhaps the nation itself. The night embraced them all equally, conspirators and defenders alike, as the Gulf waters carried Michael Reeves toward his rendezvous with destiny.